There is a silence, unique to our modern world. It is not the calming quiet of a forest, nor the peaceful hush of a library. It is the silence of a screen gone dark, the silence of a room where a notification was expected, but never arrived. In this quiet, there isn't peace, but a low, humming anxiety, a sense of waiting for something, for anything to happen. This feeling, this subtle dread in the absence of stimulation, has become one of the most pervasive, yet unspoken forms of suffering. We have built a world that runs on noise, on motion, on the perpetual promise of the next thing, the next email, the next message, the next piece of news, the next purchase. We have become so accustomed to the hum of constant doing that we have forgotten how to simply be. The quiet moments, the spaces in between, feel like a personal failure, a sign that we are not productive enough, not connected enough, not important enough. We mistake this inner stillness for boredom, and boredom for a void that must be filled at all costs. We reach for our devices, for distractions, for any sound that can drown out the unsettling sound of our own thoughts. But what if this feeling of emptiness is not the problem, but a symptom of a life lived on the surface, a life spent running from the one place we can never truly escape, ourselves? What if the feeling of being stuck, of nothing happening, is not a cage, but a doorway? The wisdom of Zen philosophy offers a different perspective. It does not see this quiet as a void, but as a space. It does not see this emptiness as a lack, but as a potential. It suggests that true peace, the kind of unshakable serenity we so desperately seek, is not found in the flurry of activity. It is not something to be achieved or acquired when the right conditions are met. It is found in the heart of the stillness we so often fear. This journey is an invitation to pause the endless search outside of ourselves and to turn our attention inward. It is an exploration of the profound power that lies waiting in the moments when it seems that nothing is happening at all. For it is in that perceived nothingness that we might just find everything. To understand the path to inner peace, we must first understand the nature of our own disquiet. We must be willing to sit in that silent room, not as a prisoner, but as an observer, and ask a simple question: why is the silence so loud? The answer begins not with a philosophical flaw, but with the very wiring of our modern brain. For generations, our minds evolved to seek out novelty, to pay attention to what was new and different, as a matter of survival. A rustle in the bushes, a new fruit on a tree, these were signals that demanded our attention. Today, that ancient survival mechanism is being perpetually hijacked. Our world is a landscape of engineered novelty. The architects of our digital lives understand the brain's reward system better than we do. They know that every notification, every like, every endlessly scrolling feed delivers a small, satisfying pulse of a neurochemical called dopamine. It is the chemical of wanting, of seeking, of anticipation. It doesn't provide lasting happiness, but it creates a powerful urge to get more. We have, in essence, trained our minds to be relentless seeking machines. We have taught them that stillness is starvation, that a moment without new input is a moment wasted. When we finally put the device down, when the world outside stops offering its endless stream of tiny rewards, the brain doesn't simply relax. It goes into a state of withdrawal. It paces the cage of our skull, looking for its next fix. This is the source of that twitchy, restless energy, that compulsion to do something, anything, to fill the space. It is not a character flaw. It is a biological response to an environment of overstimulation. We are hummingbirds conditioned to 1,000 flowers a minute, and when we are presented with just one, in a quiet field, we feel a profound and unsettling sense of lack. But the brain's craving for stimulation is only one layer of the noise. When the external world finally does fall quiet, we are confronted with something far more daunting, the unceasing monologue of our own mind. For most of our waking lives, we use busyness as a form of soundproofing. We layer our days with tasks, with media, with conversations, creating a constant hum that keeps the deeper sounds of our own consciousness at a comfortable distance. We don't solve our anxieties, we simply schedule over them. We don't process our regrets, we distract ourselves from them. When that soundproofing is removed, the inner world is amplified with startling intensity. The to-do list that was a quiet hum in the background now becomes a shouting tyrant. The awkward conversation from last week, which was a fleeting thought, now replays on a loop with excruciating detail. The vague worries about the future coalesce into vivid, frightening scenarios. The voice of the inner critic, that subtle narrator of our own inadequacy, suddenly has the stage all to itself. This is the great paradox of the unquiet mind. The noise was never truly outside of us. We were simply using the external noise to mask the internal one. It is like living beside a roaring waterfall for your entire life. The sound is so constant, so overwhelming, that you eventually cease to hear it. It becomes the very texture of your reality. If, one day, the waterfall were to suddenly stop, the resulting silence would be shocking, almost painful. And in that new, vast quiet, you would begin to hear things you never noticed before. The subtle creak of your own house, the sound of your own breathing, the beat of your own heart. This is what happens in a quiet room. The waterfall of the world stops, and we are left with the undeniable, often uncomfortable sounds of our own inner architecture. This fear of inner noise is compounded by a powerful cultural story, a myth we have all been taught to believe. It is the cult of busyness. In our society, a full calendar is a sign of a full life. We have learned to equate activity with value and productivity with self-worth. "How are you?" one person asks. "So busy," the other replies, and the words are carried with a strange and telling mixture of exhaustion and pride. It is a humble brag, a way of signaling our own importance. We are in demand, we are needed, we are moving. We have constructed an identity that is inseparable from our to-do list. To be busy is to be alive. To be still, therefore, feels like a kind of death. It threatens the very foundation of the self we have so carefully built. If I am not producing, what am I? If no one is demanding my time, do I matter? This unspoken equation drives us to fill every available moment, to see empty space in our schedule not as a gift of freedom, but as a problem to be solved. We treat our time like a void that must be frantically filled, rather than a vessel that can hold presence. This belief system makes true stillness an act of rebellion. It is a radical departure from the collective agreement that our value lies in what we do, rather than in who we are. To consciously choose to do nothing, even for a few moments, is to challenge the core belief that our existence needs to be constantly justified through action. There is a timeless story that illustrates this human predicament perfectly. It tells of a great king who ruled a land of unparalleled wealth and beauty. He had magnificent palaces, gardens that bloomed year-round, the finest musicians, the most brilliant artists, and the loyalty of all his people. He had everything a person could ever want, yet he was tormented by a deep and persistent restlessness. No matter the celebration, no matter the luxury, he could not find a moment of peace. The slightest sound grated on his nerves, a distant cough, the rustle of a servant's robes, the chirping of a bird outside his window. He became convinced that the noise of the world was the source of his suffering. So he summoned the greatest architects in the kingdom and gave them a single command: to build him a room of perfect silence. They labored for a year, using the densest stone, the thickest tapestries, and ingenious designs to insulate a chamber deep within the palace. When it was finally complete, the king dismissed his entire court. He walked alone down the long corridors and entered the silent chamber. The heavy door sealed behind him with a soft whoosh, and for the first time in his life, he was surrounded by absolute, total quiet. The silence was deeper than any he had ever imagined. But as the seconds ticked by, a sense of panic began to rise within him. For in that perfect external silence, he began to hear two sounds with a terrifying, deafening clarity. The first was the frantic, panicked drumming of his own heart. The second was the roaring, chaotic waterfall of his own anxious thoughts. He fled the room in terror, realizing at last that the noise he was trying to escape was not in his kingdom, or his palace, or his court. The noise was inside of him. We are all that king. We spend our lives building more elaborate, more sophisticated, silent chambers. We build them with our careers, with our hobbies, with our relentless consumption of entertainment, with our endless scrolling through the lives of others. We are constantly soundproofing our existence, hoping to insulate ourselves from a fundamental unease we cannot name. But stillness is the ultimate mirror. It does not create the anxiety, or the insecurity, or the sadness we feel. It simply reflects what is already there. It shows us our dependencies, our attachments, our frantic running. It is no wonder we instinctively want to turn away. It is natural to want to shatter the mirror and run back to the comfort of the noise. But to do so is to remain a prisoner of that which we refuse to see. The invitation of a spiritual path is not to judge what we see in the mirror, but simply to be willing to look, to sit with the restless king inside of us, to hear the beating of our own heart and the rushing of our own thoughts, and to not run away. For only when we stop running from the noise within can we begin to understand where it is we have been running to. This constant forward momentum, this deep cultural and biological addiction to doing, is fueled by a powerful and seductive promise, the promise of the next big thing. The restless mind, as it sits in the quiet room, does not simply churn with the noise of the present. It is also a masterful escape artist. Its favorite escape route, its most well-trodden path, leads directly into the future. It flees the perceived emptiness of the now by projecting itself into 1,000 different tomorrows. This is the grand illusion of the next big thing, a deeply ingrained belief that salvation, peace, and happiness are not available here and now, but are waiting for us at some future destination. It is the subtle, pervasive whisper that says, not yet, not here, but soon, very soon. When you achieve this, when you acquire that, when this situation changes, then you will be whole. Then you will be able to rest. This promise is the fuel for our disquiet. We are not just running from a silent present, we are running towards a decorated future, a future that we believe holds the key to our contentment. This fundamental orientation of the mind places us in a perpetual state of waiting. Life ceases to be a reality to be lived, and instead becomes a series of obstacles to be overcome on the way to a hypothetical reward. This waiting mode is the default setting for many of us. We live our lives in the waiting room of tomorrow. We wait for Friday, we wait for the vacation, we wait for the promotion, we wait to meet the right person, we wait for the children to grow up, we wait for retirement. The present moment becomes a mere stepping stone, a necessary inconvenience to be tolerated. The actual, tangible reality of our life, the only one we ever truly have, is relegated to the status of a prologue. The real story, we tell ourselves, is about to begin. This mindset is the source of a low-grade, chronic dissatisfaction. It's the feeling that life is always happening somewhere else, to someone else, or at some other time. We see the curated highlights of other people's lives and assume that is their constant reality, forgetting that they too are likely living in their own waiting room. We look at our own lives, with their mundane tasks, their imperfections, their unresolved issues, and we judge them as incomplete. We are always in rehearsal for a grand performance that is perpetually postponed. We practice our lines for a life of peace, but we never allow ourselves to step onto the stage of the present and actually live it. We have become so skilled at anticipating the future that we have lost the art of inhabiting the present. This frantic chase towards the future is based on a fundamentally flawed premise, the idea that happiness is a fixed destination. The mind operates like a simple calculator. It believes that if we add the right ingredients, a better job, more money, a new relationship, the sum will equal lasting fulfillment. So we strive, we sacrifice, we work tirelessly to reach the goal we have set for ourselves. And then, often, we do. We get the promotion, we buy the house, we go on the dream vacation. And for a moment, there is a peak of excitement. A wave of relief and satisfaction washes over us. But then, something strange happens. The peak recedes. The wave pulls back into the ocean. The new reality, which once seemed like the pinnacle of happiness, quickly becomes the new normal. The mind, being a creature of habit and comparison, simply recalibrates. The satisfaction fades, and soon, a new object of desire appears on the horizon. The finish line of the last race becomes, with startling speed, the starting line for the next one. This is the engine of the hedonic treadmill. We must keep running, faster and faster, just to maintain the same level of satisfaction. The problem was never our level of achievement. The problem was the belief that achievement itself was the answer. We are trying to fill a spiritual hunger with material or circumstantial accomplishments, and it is a thirst that can never be quenched in this way. The target of happiness is not just moving, it is a mirage. The closer we get to it, the more clearly we see that it was never there to begin with, and our thirst only grows more intense. There is an old parable that speaks to this condition with piercing clarity. It is the story of a man who, as a young boy, heard tales of mountains in the west that were filled with veins of pure gold. A fire was lit in his heart, and he left his village with a pickaxe on his shoulder and the promise of a golden future in his eyes. He found a hill that looked promising and began to dig. For months, he toiled, finding just enough small flakes of gold to trade for food and supplies. But he was driven by a powerful conviction, the belief that this was not the true treasure. The mother lode, the great vein of gold that would make him rich forever, was surely on the next hill, the one that looked a little taller, a little more majestic in the distance. So he packed his meager belongings and moved on. On the next hill, the story was the same. He found a little gold, enough to keep him going, but his mind was consumed with the hill beyond that one. This became the pattern of his entire life. He crossed sun-drenched valleys of breathtaking beauty, but he never truly saw the wildflowers blooming at his feet. His eyes were always fixed on the distant peaks. He slept under skies, littered with a billion brilliant stars, but he never felt their awesome stillness, for his dreams were filled with the glint of gold. He drank from streams so pure and clear they seemed like liquid crystal, but he never tasted the water, for his mind was parched with a thirst for the future. Decades passed. His back became bent, his hair turned white, and his hands were calloused and worn. One evening, exhausted and defeated, he collapsed on a barren hillside. He had no fortune, no family, nothing to show for his life but a worn-out pickaxe. As he lay there, waiting for the end, he looked out across the landscape. The setting sun was painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple that broke his heart with their beauty. For the first time, he heard the sound of the wind as it sang through the canyons, a song that was ancient and peaceful. He felt the cool earth beneath him, solid and real, and in that moment, a devastating realization washed over him. He had spent his entire life chasing a treasure in the distance, while unknowingly walking through paradise every single day. He realized the gold was never the point. The treasure was in the deep blue of the sky, the warmth of the sun, the taste of clean water. It was in the journey itself, and he had missed all of it. We are all that gold digger. We sacrifice the untold riches of the present moment for the promise of a future that exists only in our imagination. We miss the small joys of our daily lives, the genuine connection in a simple conversation, the beauty of a passing moment, because our eyes are fixed on a distant, glittering prize. This explains a very common, yet rarely discussed phenomenon, the emptiness that so often follows a great achievement. The student who works for years to graduate, only to feel a hollow sense of, now what? The entrepreneur who sells their company and feels a surprising wave of depression. The couple that plans their wedding for a year, only to feel a strange letdown after the honeymoon. This is the post-peak valley. It happens because the identity, the sense of self, was completely wrapped up in the pursuit of the goal. The I was a striver, a climber, a future seeker. When the future arrives and the seeking is over, the I loses its sense of purpose. It doesn't know who it is, without a mountain to climb. This reveals the great disconnect at the heart of our experience. Our mind is a time traveler, constantly flitting between nostalgic reconstructions of the past and anxious fantasies of the future. But our body, our senses, our very life force exists only and always in the absolute present. The texture of reality, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the feeling of your breath moving in and out of your body can only be experienced now. You cannot feel a breath you took yesterday, nor can you feel one you will take tomorrow. And yet, we sacrifice the one place where life actually happens for two places that exist only as thoughts. This endless cycle of future chasing is a game rigged against us. We can never win because the prize we seek is not located in the future. The peace we crave is not waiting behind the next achievement. We are trying to satisfy a hunger for presence with the empty promises of tomorrow. It is an effort as futile as trying to catch the wind in a net. To begin to break free from this exhausting and unfulfilling pattern, we must look more closely at the one who is doing all the chasing. We must investigate this sense of I that is so convinced that its happiness lies just around the next bend. This restless, future-oriented identity is a construction, a story we have told ourselves for so long that we have mistaken it for our true nature. In the language of spiritual exploration, this is the ego. To find true peace, we must be willing to gently untangle the threads of this constructed self and see what remains when the story of striving finally falls silent. We have seen that the restless mind is constantly running, fleeing the present moment in a relentless pursuit of a promised future. This raises the most fundamental question of all. Who, exactly, is doing all of this running? Who is this I that is never satisfied? Who is this I that feels empty in the quiet and hopeful for the future? When we use this word, I, we feel we are referring to something solid, something continuous, something essential to our very being. But the wisdom traditions, particularly Zen, invite us to look much more closely at this assumed identity. They suggest that what we call I, our personality, our sense of self, is not a solid entity at all. Rather, it is a construction. It is a story, a narrative that the mind has been weaving since we were children. This constructed self is often referred to as the ego. This is not necessarily the ego of common conversation, which implies arrogance or conceit. It is something much more fundamental. It is the composite identity we have built for ourselves, piece by piece, throughout our lives. Think of this ego, this sense of I, as a story being written in real time. The chapters are made of memories. I am the person who grew up in that town, who had those parents, who succeeded at this and failed at that. The characters are the roles we play. I am a parent, a child, a worker, a friend, an enemy. The plot is decorated with our beliefs, our opinions, our likes and our dislikes. I am someone who believes in justice. I am a person who enjoys the mountains but dislikes the city. This story is incredibly detailed, and we have spent our entire lives embellishing it. But the most crucial element of this story, the one that gives it its structure, is the principle of separation. The ego defines itself not by what it is, but by what it is not. I only exists in relation to another. I am smarter than him. I am not as successful as her. This is my property, not yours. This is my belief, not theirs. The ego is a fortress built of comparisons, judgments, and boundaries. We have become so identified with this story, so lost in the character we are playing, that we have forgotten a crucial truth. We are not the character, we are the actor. The story of you is a temporary role. The consciousness that gives life to that role, the awareness that is reading these lines of thought right now, is something much deeper, much vaster, and much more mysterious. Understanding that the ego is a story reveals its fundamental motivation. A story requires a plot requires tension, conflict, and a narrative arc. A story about a character who sits peacefully and contentedly in a room is not a very interesting story. Therefore, the ego, in order to sustain its own existence, needs problems. It thrives on drama. It feels most real, most alive, when it is engaged in a struggle. It loves to be right, and it secretly loves to be wronged, because being a victim gives it a powerful sense of identity and grievance. It needs to have an opinion on everything. It needs to plan, to worry, to strategize, to judge, to complain. This is the fuel that keeps its narrative going. This is why a state of simple presence, a moment when nothing is happening, is so deeply threatening to the ego. In that quiet, open space, there is no problem to solve. There is no enemy to defeat. There is no one to impress, and nothing to achieve. The story comes to a halt. The role of the main character becomes redundant. And in that redundancy, the ego feels a terrifying sense of annihilation. It is like a spinning top that must keep spinning to stay upright. The constant thinking, worrying, and wanting is the energy that keeps it spinning. To be still, to be silent, to simply be present, is to allow the top to wobble and fall. The ego fights this with all its might, because from its limited perspective, this stillness feels like death. For centuries, Zen masters have used unconventional tools called koans to help students break through this identification with the egoic story. A koan is not a riddle to be solved by logic, but a question designed to exhaust the logical mind, forcing it to surrender and allowing a deeper truth to emerge. One of the most famous of these is the question, before your mother and father were born, what was your original face? Ponder this question for a moment. It is a work of pure genius. It systematically dismantles the entire story of you. Your name was given to you after you were born. Your body was created through your parents. Your memories, your education, your nationality, your language, your every belief and opinion, all of it came into being after your parents were born. The logical mind races to find an answer and finds nothing. It cannot grasp it. The question is a pointer, directing our attention away from the constructed self, the mask we have worn for so long, and towards something more fundamental. It points to the consciousness that existed before the story of me began. It asks us to feel into the nature of the actor, not the role. The original face is not a physical face. It is the formless, timeless awareness that is our true nature, the silent witness to the entire drama of our lives. This may sound abstract, but the path to experiencing it is profoundly simple. It begins with the practice of creating a space between you and your thoughts. The ego's trick is to convince you that you are your thoughts. When a thought of anxiety appears, the ego says, I am anxious. When a thought of anger appears, it says, I am angry. We become completely identified with the mental and emotional weather passing through us. The practice is to gently but consistently challenge this identification. The next time a strong thought or emotion arises, try a subtle shift in your internal language. Instead of thinking, I am angry, try noticing, I am aware of the feeling of anger arising within me. Instead of, I am worried about the future, try, I am aware of a stream of thoughts about the future. This simple shift changes everything. It's like stepping back from a movie screen. A moment ago, you were lost in the film, identified with the protagonist. Now, you are aware that you are the one watching the film. You have not destroyed the thought or the feeling, you have simply stopped being its prisoner. You have created a space. In that space between the observer and the observed is freedom. That space is consciousness itself. That space is your original face. You are not the clouds of thought and emotion that drift through the mind. You are the vast, open, silent sky in which they appear. The sky is never harmed by the weather. It allows the storm clouds, the rain, the sunshine to come and go without ever becoming them. Our true nature is like that sky. The ego is the person who has forgotten they are the sky and believes they are a particularly important and often troubled cloud. So, the I that fears the quiet room, the I that endlessly chases the next big thing, is this constructed story, this character who believes it is a separate, solid entity. It is a story that has been incredibly useful for navigating the practicalities of the world, for learning, and for surviving. But it is not the truth of who we are. Our deeper identity is not a story. It is the silent, aware presence in which all stories, all thoughts, all experiences arise and pass away. This constructed self, however, is not self-sustaining. Like any engine, it requires fuel to keep running, to maintain its illusion of solidity and importance. It has a voracious appetite. To truly understand this restless ego and its constant activity, we must now turn our attention to its primary source of nourishment. We must investigate the powerful, primal energy that it feeds upon, the force that keeps it chasing shadows and running from the silence. This energy is the force of desire. We have identified the ego, the constructed story of I, as the restless seeker, the chaser of a future that never arrives. But this ego is not self-powered. It runs on a specific kind of fuel, an energy so primal and pervasive that it forms the very fabric of our unexamined lives. This fuel is the energy of desire. In the teachings of the Buddha, this is known as tanha, a word that translates more accurately as thirst or craving. This is not the simple, healthy desire for food when hungry or for companionship when lonely. Tanha is a deeper psychological thirst. It is a persistent, gnawing feeling that something is missing, a fundamental sense of incompleteness that drives us to seek satisfaction in things outside of ourselves. This endless wanting is the very engine that creates the feeling of emptiness we are so desperate to escape. We believe that our desires will lead us to fullness, but the profound irony is that the mechanism of desire itself is what hollows us out, leaving us feeling more empty than when we began. It is crucial to make a distinction here. The energy of desire itself is not inherently bad or sinful. It is a natural part of being alive. To desire warmth on a cold day, or to desire to see a loved one smile, is a manifestation of the life force itself. The problem, the source of our suffering, lies not in the desire, but in our relationship to it. It lies in the act of clinging, of attachment. This is the subtle but powerful mental move where we make our inner peace conditional upon the fulfillment of the desire. A simple desire can arise and pass through the mind like a cloud in the sky, but an attached desire, a craving, is like a hook. The thought arises, I want that new car, and immediately the hook of attachment follows, and I will not be happy, I will not be worthy, I will not be at peace until I get it. It is this clinging, this tensing around the desire that transforms a simple preference into a source of deep-seated agitation. Without attachment, you can appreciate a beautiful sunset. With attachment, you suffer when the sun finally sets, because you were trying to possess it. The suffering is not caused by the sunset, but by the futile attempt to hold on to something that is, by its very nature, fleeting. We spend our lives grasping at clouds, and then wondering why our hands are always empty. This cycle of craving operates as a predictable, self-perpetuating loop, a mechanism that Buddhist psychology mapped out with stunning precision thousands of years ago. It begins with a feeling of lack. This is the baseline state of the unexamined ego, a subtle but constant hum of dissatisfaction. It feels that something is wrong, something is missing from its story. I am not quite happy enough, not secure enough, not respected enough. This feeling of lack is uncomfortable, so the mind immediately begins to search for a solution outside of itself. It projects its hope for wholeness onto an external object, a person, or a situation. This is the second stage, seeking and striving. The mind latches onto a goal. If only I had that partner, that job, that experience, then this feeling of lack would disappear. This triggers the chase. We plan, we work, we expend enormous amounts of energy pursuing the object of our desire. Eventually, we may succeed. We get the thing we wanted. This is the third stage, a moment of temporary satisfaction. There is a brief pleasure, a release of the tension of striving. The ego feels a rush of validation. For a fleeting moment, the story feels complete, but it never lasts. This leads to the fourth and final stage, habituation, and the return of lack. The mind quickly gets used to the new object or situation. The novelty wears off. The beautiful new car becomes just the car. The exciting new relationship settles into routine. And because the underlying feeling of lack was never actually addressed, it inevitably resurfaces. The emptiness was an inner condition, and we tried to solve it with an outer remedy. The project was doomed from the start. And now, the feeling of lack often returns with even more force, because the last fix proved to be insufficient. So the loop begins again, a more desperate search for a bigger and better prize, trapping us in an endless cycle of suffering, a moment-to-moment psychological treadmill from which there seems to be no escape. This ancient internal mechanism of desire has been recognized and exploited with terrifying efficiency in our modern world. Our entire consumerist economy is fundamentally based on the mass production of tanha. The purpose of advertising is not to provide information. It is to skillfully and systematically generate a feeling of lack where none existed before. It presents you with an image of a perfect life, a flawless body, an effortless existence, and then whispers, "Your life is not this. You are not this. You are incomplete. But this product, this service, this experience, this will be the missing piece. This will make you whole." Social media has amplified this process to an unprecedented degree. We are no longer just exposed to manufactured images in magazines or on television. We are now carrying a device in our pockets that provides a 24-hour-a-day stream of curated perfection from the lives of others, creating a constant, grinding sense of comparison and inadequacy. Our natural human tendency toward desire is being perpetually stimulated, weaponized, and accelerated, creating a culture of hungry ghosts. In the intricate cosmology of Buddhism, there is a realm said to be inhabited by beings called pretas, or hungry ghosts. They are not meant to be taken as literal creatures, but as powerful metaphors for a state of mind. The hungry ghosts are depicted with enormous swollen bellies, which represent their bottomless, insatiable desires. They are racked with a constant, agonizing hunger and thirst, but they also have necks as thin as the eye of a needle and mouths no bigger than a pinprick. Consequently, no matter how much they try to consume, they can never take in enough to fill the vast, aching void of their bellies. Even when they find something that looks like food or water, it is said to turn to fire or filth the moment it touches their lips. This is the perfect description of a mind caught in the trap of craving. Our wanting is enormous, a giant, empty stomach, but our ability to be truly satisfied by the objects of our desire is infinitesimally small, a throat no wider than a needle. We are trying to pour the entire ocean of the world through a tiny opening, hoping to fill an inner space that has no bottom. We binge on consumer goods, on entertainment, on experiences, on the approval of others, and for a moment we feel a trickle of relief, but it is never enough. The deep hunger remains, and the frantic search for something more continues. We are all living as hungry ghosts, starved in the midst of plenty. The feeling of emptiness that we dread, the very void we try to fill with our frantic doing and wanting, is not a pre-existing state. It is the aftermath of this cycle. It is the hollow echo left in the chamber of the heart after the brief excitement of a fulfilled desire has faded. The craving itself creates the void. The more we try to fill it, the more we reinforce the cycle, and the larger the emptiness becomes. The path to peace, therefore, is not to find the right thing to finally fill the void. The path is to stop the cycle that creates the void in the first place. This begins with the wisdom to distinguish between our genuine needs and the infinite wants of the ego. Our needs for food, shelter, warmth, and connection are finite and can be met. The ego's wants for validation, for endless stimulation, for permanent security in a world that is fundamentally impermanent, are infinite and can never, ever be satisfied. This intense, grasping energy of pulling the world towards us is only one half of the ego's mechanism of suffering. It has an equal and opposite counterpart, an energy just as powerful in creating our inner turmoil. This is the energy of pushing the world away, the energy of aversion. To fully understand the prison we have built for ourselves, we must now turn our attention to the other side of this restless coin, to the endless, exhausting dance of like and dislike. The engine of the ego, fueled by the insatiable thirst of desire, has two primary movements. The first, as we have seen, is the energy of craving, the desperate pulling towards us of everything we believe will complete our story. The second is its equal and opposite force, the energy of aversion. This is the frantic pushing away of everything we believe threatens our story. These two movements, grasping and resisting, wanting and not wanting, are the two fundamental pillars upon which our inner turmoil is built. They are two sides of the same counterfeit coin, and we spend the currency of our lives in their exhausting marketplace. We are constantly sorting our experience into two piles: things we like and want more of, and things we dislike and want to get rid of. This relentless activity of judging and labeling is so automatic, so deeply ingrained, that we are rarely even aware we are doing it. It is the very texture of the unexamined mind, a constant, draining dance of like and dislike. This mental sorting process is a relic of our ancient survival programming. For our distant ancestors, the ability to quickly label things was a matter of life and death. A roaring predator was unequivocally bad. A ripe source of food was unequivocally good. This binary, black and white assessment of reality was essential for navigating a physically perilous world. The problem is that we now apply this same crude, primitive mechanism to the infinitely complex and nuanced reality of our modern lives. The thinking mind has become a relentless judge, holding a gavel and passing instant sentence on every single moment. A traffic jam is judged as bad. A compliment is judged as good. The feeling of sadness is judged as bad. The feeling of excitement is judged as good. The weather, the news, the actions of others, our own thoughts, are all put on trial and instantly labeled. This creates a constant, running commentary in our heads, a relentless scorecard that separates us from a direct experience of life. We are no longer simply living, we are perpetually auditing our existence against a set of arbitrary preferences. This internal judge is tireless, and its activity is the source of a constant, low-grade agitation that we have come to accept as normal. The consequence of this endless judgment is a state of perpetual inner warfare. Our mind becomes a battlefield, and our energy is consumed in a pointless tug of war. When we label an experience as good or pleasant, the mechanism of desire immediately kicks in. We grasp at the experience, we cling to it, we try to prolong it, we fear its ending. When the pleasant feeling inevitably fades, as all things do, we suffer. We suffer not because the pleasantness ended, but because our clinging created an expectation that it should be permanent. On the other side, when we label an experience as bad or unpleasant, the mechanism of aversion takes over. We resist the experience, we fight it, we complain about it, we tense our bodies and minds against it. We expend enormous amounts of energy trying to push away what is already here. This resistance is the very definition of stress. The suffering comes not from the unpleasant event itself, but from our violent refusal to accept its presence. We are like a person caught in a torrential downpour, shaking our fist at the sky and screaming that it should not be raining, all while getting thoroughly soaked. The rain is just rain. The suffering is in the resistance. Our life energy, which could be used for creativity, for connection, for presence, is instead squandered in this exhausting push and pull, this frantic rowing of a small boat, chasing every pleasant island and fleeing every dark cloud, never realizing that peace can only be found when we finally put down the oars. There is a profound and ancient story that cuts to the very heart of this human folly. It is the story of an old farmer who lived in a tiny village. He was poor, but he had a magnificent horse that was the envy of all. One day, the horse ran away. The farmer's neighbors came to console him. "What terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A week later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a herd of 10 wild horses from the mountains. The neighbors gathered again, this time to celebrate. "What wonderful luck," they exclaimed. The farmer again replied, "Maybe." The next day, the farmer's only son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off, and his leg was badly broken. The neighbors came once more, shaking their heads. "Oh, what dreadful luck," they lamented. The farmer looked at his son's injury and said, "Maybe." A few weeks later, the emperor's army marched into the village, conscripting every able-bodied young man for a war from which few would return. They saw the farmer's son with his broken leg, and they passed him by. The neighbors, whose own sons had been taken, came to the farmer with tears in their eyes. "You were right," they said. "Your son's injury, what truly good luck." The farmer, looking out towards the road where the army had disappeared, said one last time, "Maybe." This story reveals the complete inadequacy of our judgments. The web of cause and effect is infinitely vast and complex, far beyond the grasp of our limited intellect. The farmer's wisdom was not in predicting the future, it was in his radical refusal to label the present. He lived in a state of acceptance, understanding that what appears to be a curse can be a hidden blessing, and what feels like a gift can be the seed of a future sorrow. The farmer's wisdom points the way out of our self-inflicted war. The path to peace is the cultivation of this non-judgmental acceptance. This does not mean becoming a passive doormat. It does not mean condoning injustice or refusing to act to improve our lives. It refers to the inner world, to the cessation of the automatic, habitual labeling of our moment-to-moment experience. It is the practice of developing a quality of mind the Buddhists call upekkha, or equanimity. Equanimity is not indifference or apathy. It is a spacious, balanced, and deeply caring state of mind that allows all experiences to arise and pass away without being thrown off balance by them. It is the ability to feel the full spectrum of life, the joy and the sorrow, the pleasure and the pain, without getting hooked by desire or strangled by aversion. Peace is not found by successfully constructing a life that contains only things we like. Such a life is impossible. Peace is found by developing a mind that is no longer at war with the life that we have. It is discovered in the calm, steady center of our being, a place from which we can watch the dance of like and dislike with a gentle, compassionate curiosity, without needing to join the frantic dance ourselves. We have now traveled into the heart of our own restlessness. We have seen that the feeling of emptiness and anxiety is not a random affliction, but the direct result of a mind at war with itself. It is a mind identified with a fragile, constructed ego. It is a mind that constantly flees the present for an imaginary future. It is a mind that is hooked by the promise of desire and paralyzed by the fear of aversion. This entire structure of suffering, this inner noise, is what prevents us from experiencing the deep, abiding peace that is our birthright. We have taken apart the machine of our own disquiet. We are now standing in the space that is left when the machine temporarily grinds to a halt. We are standing where the wise farmer stood, in a place of maybe. What is this space? What is the nature of reality when viewed without the distorting lens of our judgments, our stories, and our fears? To answer that, we must now turn our full attention to the most profound, most misunderstood, and most liberating concept in all of Zen. We must dare to explore the nature of what is called shunyata, the vast, creative, and silent expanse of emptiness. We arrive now at the very heart of our journey. We have examined the restless mind, the chase for the future, the story of the ego, and the twin forces of desire and aversion. All of these are symptoms. To find the cure, we must look to the underlying nature of reality itself, as revealed by the deepest insights of Zen. This brings us to a word that is perhaps the most misunderstood, the most intimidating, and yet the most liberating in all of spiritual philosophy. The word is emptiness. In Sanskrit, it is shunyata. For many of us, the word emptiness lands with a chill. It conjures images of a cold, meaningless void, of loss, of nihilism. It sounds like a denial of life, a philosophy of nothingness. The ego, the story of I, hears the word emptiness, and it panics, for it senses its own dissolution. It is essential to state this clearly from the outset. This fear is based on a profound misunderstanding. In the context of Zen, emptiness is not a negative or terrifying concept. It is the doorway to true freedom, the foundation of boundless compassion, and the source of all creative potential. It is not the end of the world, but the beginning of seeing the world as it truly is. To grasp the meaning of emptiness, we must first be clear about what it is not. Emptiness is not nothingness. The teaching of emptiness does not claim that the world around us is an illusion, or that the chair you are sitting on does not exist. The sensations of life are real. The joy and the pain are real. The teaching does not negate our lived experience. It invites us to understand it on a much deeper level. Nor is emptiness a philosophy of nihilism. It does not mean that life is without meaning, or that our choices and actions are irrelevant. In fact, as we shall see, the truth of emptiness reveals why our actions have a profound and inescapable significance. It is the very basis of ethics and connection. And finally, emptiness is not a particular state of mind to be achieved, like a blissful trance or a state of being zoned out. It is not about stopping your thoughts or making your mind a blank slate. It is a fundamental insight into the nature of existence, an insight that can be present even in the midst of a busy and active life. The fear of emptiness is the ego's fear of losing its own story. But what we stand to lose is only a prison, and what we stand to gain is everything. So, if emptiness is not nothingness, what is it? The clearest and most direct definition is this: emptiness means empty of a separate, independent self. It is the recognition that no thing, no person, no event exists on its own, by its own power. Everything in the universe exists only in relation to everything else. To make this clear, let us consider a simple sheet of paper. We look at it and we call it paper. It seems to be a solid, separate object. But if we practice looking deeply, as the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, we can see things we might not have noticed before. We can see the sunshine that was essential for the tree to grow, from which this paper was made. So, the sunshine is in the paper. If you take the sunshine out, the paper cannot exist. We can see the clouds that provided the rain to nourish the tree. The clouds are in the paper. If you take the clouds away, there is no paper. Now look closer. We can see the logger who cut down the tree. We can see his parents who gave him life. We can see the wheat that made the bread he ate for breakfast. We can see the soil, the miners who made his tools, the entire economy. All of these things are present in this single sheet of paper. If you were to remove any one of these elements, if you took away the tree, the rain, the logger, the earth, the paper would cease to exist. It has no separate, independent self-nature. It is empty of a separate self. And yet, at the same time, because it is empty of a separate self, it is full of the entire cosmos. It is with all that is. This is the profound meaning of emptiness. It is not an absence, but a radical, all-encompassing presence. It is the truth of our complete and total interconnectedness. Another powerful image used to convey this truth is that of a simple bowl. Imagine you are holding a beautifully crafted ceramic bowl. What is it that makes it a bowl? Is it the clay from which it is formed? Is it the glaze that gives it color and shine, number? While these are its components, what makes it functional as a bowl, what gives it its very bowlness, is the empty space inside it. The utility of the bowl is defined by its emptiness. It is because of that empty space that you can fill it with food or water or carry things in it. Its potential lies in its emptiness. If the bowl were a solid lump of clay, it would be useless as a bowl. It could not receive anything. This is a perfect metaphor for the mind. A mind that is full of its own fixed ideas, its rigid opinions, its judgments, its prejudices, and its personal story is like a bowl that has been pre-filled with solid concrete. It is hard, inflexible, and incapable of receiving anything new. It cannot learn, it cannot grow, it cannot connect. An open mind, a mind that has glimpsed the truth of emptiness, is like the empty bowl. It is spacious, receptive, and flexible. It is ready to receive the nourishment of the present moment, to hold the experiences of life, both joyful and sorrowful, with a gentle and accommodating presence. It does not cling to what it holds. It allows things to come and go, always returning to its own inherent, spacious nature. This understanding reveals the ultimate gift of emptiness. Because nothing exists with a fixed, separate, independent self, it means that nothing is static or permanent. Everything is in a constant state of flow and transformation. Emptiness is the very precondition for life's creative dance. It is the ultimate source of potential and freedom. If things were not empty, if they had a solid, unchanging essence, then nothing could ever change. A seed would be forever a seed and could never become a flower. An acorn would never become a mighty oak tree. A person who made a mistake would be eternally defined as a bad person, trapped forever in their past actions, incapable of transformation or redemption. A relationship that is broken could never be healed. It is because we are empty of a fixed self that we have the freedom to grow, to learn, to change our minds, to heal our hearts, to become kinder, wiser, and more compassionate beings. Emptiness is not a void, it is a womb. It is the open space of infinite possibility from which all forms arise and into which they all dissolve. It is the ultimate liberation from the prison of a fixed identity, a fixed past, and a fixed future. It is the freedom to be truly, dynamically, and creatively alive in each unfolding moment. So we see that emptiness, far from being a cold and nihilistic void, is actually the most intimate and hopeful truth of our existence. It is the simple recognition that we are not separate. We are not isolated fragments in a meaningless universe. We are each, like the sheet of paper, a unique expression of the entire cosmos. We are woven from sunshine and starlight, from the actions of our ancestors and the hopes of our children. This truth is the very foundation of compassion. When we see this interconnectedness, we understand that to harm another is to harm ourselves. To love another is to love ourselves. To see this profound truth, we can look at it from another angle. We have explored the potential of the empty bowl. To appreciate its gift more fully, it is helpful to first examine the state of a mind that is already full. We must understand the prison of the full cup before we can truly celebrate the fullness that arises from being empty. We have spoken of emptiness as the truth of our profound interconnectedness, the realization that nothing exists in isolation. We have used the image of a bowl whose usefulness is defined by its empty space. To bring this liberating concept even closer to our own experience, we now turn to another of Zen's most powerful and practical metaphors, that of the teacup. For the truth is, most of us walk through life not with an empty bowl, ready to receive, but with a cup that is already filled to the brim, so full that nothing new can possibly enter. True fullness, the kind that brings peace and wisdom, comes not from adding more to a cup that is already overflowing, but from having the courage to empty it. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this principle. A highly educated university professor, a man renowned for his intellect and his vast knowledge of world philosophies, traveled to visit a reclusive Zen master. He came not as a humble student seeking guidance, but as an academic researcher, intending to understand, categorize, and ultimately master the subject of Zen. Upon being welcomed by the master, the professor began to speak. He spoke for a long time, displaying his impressive learning. He talked about intricate philosophical theories. He quoted ancient texts. He explained his own interpretations of consciousness and reality, and detailed how he believed Zen fit into his intellectual framework. The Zen master listened patiently, nodding occasionally, his presence calm and unassuming. After the professor had spoken for a very long time, the master smiled gently and said, "Let us have some tea." He brought out a simple tray with a teapot and 2 cups. He placed a cup in front of the professor and began to pour. The dark tea filled the cup to the brim, but the master did not stop. He continued to pour, and the tea began to overflow, spilling into the saucer, then running off the saucer and onto the table, cascading in a warm stream onto the floor. The professor watched, first with confusion, and then with alarm. "Stop," he shouted, unable to contain his frustration. "The cup is full. No more will go in." The Zen master calmly stopped pouring, looked at the professor with a clear, penetrating gaze, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" This story is a direct mirror held up to the state of our own minds. We are all, in our own way, that professor. We are filled to the brim with what we think we know. Our cups are overflowing with a lifetime of accumulated beliefs, second-hand opinions, ingrained prejudices, and personal memories. We approach every new moment, every new person, every new experience, not with fresh eyes, but through the thick, colored filter of our full cup. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as our conditioning has taught us to see it. We don't truly listen to another person. We listen for confirmation of what we already believe. We don't experience the present moment directly. We experience our judgment about the present moment. This kind of fullness is not a sign of wisdom. It is the greatest barrier to it. It is the ego's certainty, its arrogant conviction that its map of the world is the world itself. To empty your cup is the essential first step on any genuine path of learning or spiritual growth. It is the conscious act of setting aside your certainties, of admitting to yourself, I don't know. This is the cultivation of what is known as beginner's mind. A beginner's mind is not an ignorant mind. It is a mind that is open, spacious, curious, and free from the weight of its own expertise. It is the mind of a child seeing a butterfly for the very first time, full of wonder and free of definition. True wisdom is not found in the endless accumulation of facts to be crammed into a full cup. It is found in the clarity of direct perception, which is only possible for a mind that is empty and receptive. This principle extends far beyond learning and deep into the heart of our relationships. The full cup of the ego is what creates the painful illusion of separation. It is filled with the story of me, my, and mine. My opinions, my history, my hurts, my ambitions. This story, which we hold so precious, acts as a solid wall between ourselves and others. We live inside this fortress of self-concern, peering out at the world and judging it based on how it affects our story. But when we begin to practice emptying the cup, when the incessant monologue of me begins to quiet down, the walls of the fortress become transparent. The solid sense of a separate self starts to dissolve. In that growing space, something new can enter, something called compassion, the insight of emptiness, the lived understanding that we are all interconnected, is the soil from which genuine compassion naturally grows. This is not the pity one feels for someone less fortunate, which is often a disguised form of egoic superiority. This is karuna, a deep empathy born from the recognition of a shared existence. It is the visceral understanding that your joy is my joy, and your suffering is my suffering, because the separation between you and me was a fiction of the mind all along. The empty space created by a less dominant ego is the fertile ground where true, unconditional kindness can take root and blossom. This is a different kind of fullness, a fullness of connection that arises only when the cup of self is no longer overflowing. This same dynamic is at play in the realm of creativity. A mind that is full of old habits, established formulas, and the rigid belief in the way things are supposed to be done cannot create anything truly new. It is trapped in a feedback loop of its own past knowledge. It can only rearrange what is already there. True creativity, whether it is in art, in science, in business, or in the art of living itself, always arises from a space of not knowing. It emerges from the void. It is born when we have the courage to let go of our comfortable assumptions and wander into the unknown. The empty cup is the blank canvas for the painter. It is the silent page for the poet. It is the open question that drives the scientist to discovery. It is the necessary precondition for an original idea, a new solution, or a fresh perspective to make itself known. It is the space where our deeper intuition can finally be heard, once it is no longer drowned out by the noise of what we already know. Therefore, the emptiness we speak of is not a deficiency or a lack. It is a state of radical openness, a cultivated receptivity. It is the empty teacup, waiting to be filled with the warmth and aroma of this very moment, just as it is. It is the conscious choice to be a harbor open to the vast ocean of life, rather than a sealed bottle bobbing along on the surface, full of its own stale air. This concept of emptying our minds may still feel philosophical or abstract. You may be wondering, how does one actually do this? It is one thing to appreciate the metaphor of the empty cup, but it is another thing entirely to put it into practice in our own lives, which are so often filled with noise, responsibility, and relentless mental chatter. How do we begin, in a tangible and experiential way, to create this inner space? The answer lies not in more thinking, but in a practice that goes beyond thought. It lies in the simple, profound, and transformative art of just sitting. We have spoken of the empty cup, the open mind, the state of receptivity that allows for wisdom and compassion to enter our lives. It is a beautiful and inspiring idea. But how do we actually begin to empty a cup that has been filled to the brim over a lifetime? The answer lies in a practice that is utterly simple in its instruction, yet profound in its effect. It is the central practice of the Zen tradition, an art form disguised as an act of profound simplicity. It is the art of just sitting. In Japanese, this is called zazen. Zazen is not what most of us think of when we hear the word meditation. It is not a technique to achieve a special state, nor is it an effort to wage war against our own thoughts. It is something far more radical and healing. It is the practice of non-doing, the courageous act of stopping, and simply being present with the totality of our experience, just as it is. For the mind accustomed to constant striving, the mind that wants to conquer, to achieve, to measure, and to succeed, the instruction of Zazen is almost incomprehensible. The goal of Zazen is to have no goal. Its purpose is to be without purpose. When we first sit down to practice, the goal-oriented mind immediately takes over. It asks, am I doing this right? Am I peaceful yet? Why am I still having so many thoughts? How can I get rid of them? It turns the act of sitting into another project for the ego, another task to be completed and perfected. Zazen is the direct antidote to this lifelong habit. The invitation is to let go of the entire project of self-improvement. It is to surrender the need to control or manipulate our experience. We are not trying to force our mind to be quiet, nor are we trying to generate feelings of peace and bliss. We are simply showing up, moment by moment, for whatever arises, without judgment and without a personal agenda. This is a profound act of trust. It is faith in our own inherent nature, a trust that if we can simply be still and present, without interfering, a natural clarity will emerge on its own. It is a practice that gently asks the striving, controlling ego to take a back seat and to allow a deeper, quieter wisdom to come forward. While the spirit of Zazen is one of letting go, the practice itself is grounded in the tangible reality of our body and our breath. These become our anchors in the present moment. The posture of Zazen is one of dignity and stability. Whether sitting on a cushion on the floor or upright in a chair, the spine is kept straight but not rigid, allowing energy to flow freely. The body is still, poised and alert, a physical expression of the mental state we are cultivating. A stable body encourages a stable mind. Within this stillness, we bring our attention to the breath. The breath is the perfect anchor because it is always with us, and it is always happening now. You cannot take a breath in the past, nor can you take one in the future. To be aware of your breathing is to be here. The practice is not to think about the breath, but to simply feel its physical sensation. Perhaps it is the feeling of the cool air entering the nostrils and the warm air leaving, or perhaps it is the gentle rising and falling of the abdomen. We don't try to change the breath or control it in any way. We allow it to be natural, and when the mind wanders, which it will, 1,000 times, the instruction is not one of self-criticism. The instruction is simply to notice that the mind has wandered, and then gently, patiently, as if guiding a lost puppy, to return the attention back to the anchor of the breath. Each return is a small victory of presence over distraction. One of the most common and immediate frustrations for anyone beginning this practice is the discovery of just how chaotic the mind truly is. A new student often complains to their teacher, "I cannot meditate. The moment I sit down, my mind explodes with thoughts, plans, memories, and worries. It is impossible to find peace." The wisdom of Zen offers a beautiful parable in response. A Zen master, hearing this complaint, does not offer a complex technique. Instead, He picks up a glass of water from a nearby stream. The water is full of mud and silt, cloudy and opaque. He holds it up and says, "You want this water to be clear, but you cannot achieve it by force. If you stir it frantically with a stick, you will only make it murkier. If you try to painstakingly scoop out each particle of mud, you will spend a lifetime and get nowhere." The master then gently places the glass on a table and says, "Let us simply let it be." They sit together in silence, watching the glass. At first, nothing seems to happen, but gradually, slowly, the particles of mud, under their own weight, begin to settle. The water at the top of the glass begins to clear. After some time, the water becomes perfectly transparent, and the mud rests peacefully at the bottom. The master then says, "Your mind is like this water. Do not fight your thoughts. Do not try to cast them out. Do not stir up your mind by struggling against itself. Simply set it down. Give it the gift of your still, non-judgmental attention. The thoughts will settle all on their own." This reveals the true nature of the practice. The cushion is a laboratory for life. The experiences that arise during Zazen are not interruptions to our meditation. They are our meditation. When a wave of boredom arises, we don't immediately reach for a distraction. We learn to sit with the raw energy of boredom and observe it with curiosity. When physical discomfort appears in the knee or the back, we don't instantly shift our position. We investigate the sensation, separating the raw physical data from the mind's story about it. When a painful memory surfaces, we learn to allow it to be held in the spacious container of our awareness without being swept away by its narrative. We are building a kind of spiritual muscle. We are training ourselves in a safe and controlled environment to stop being pushed and pulled by every thought, every feeling, and every sensation that arises. The stillness we discover in Zazen is therefore not the dead silence of an empty room. It is not the absence of thought or feeling. That would be an inert, lifeless mind. The true stillness of Zen is the vast, silent, unshakable awareness in which the entire storm of life is allowed to unfold. It is the deep clarity of the water, which is not disturbed by the mud resting peacefully at the bottom. So, the art of just sitting is the ultimate practice of emptying our cup. It is a conscious letting go of our need to control, our addiction to doing, and our endless search for something more. We are not turning away from life. We are turning towards it with a level of intimacy we have never experienced before. We are learning to be at home in our own skin, to be at peace with our own minds. But the profound insights and the spacious awareness cultivated in the stillness of Zazen are not meant to be confined to a meditation cushion. They are meant to be carried with us, out into the complex and often chaotic world of our daily lives. The next step in our journey is to learn how to apply this practice of non-judgmental awareness, not just to our seated posture, but to the very flow of our consciousness itself. As we move through our day, we must learn how to watch the ever-flowing river of our thoughts without being swept away by its powerful current. The foundation of our practice, the stillness cultivated in Zazen, is like building a sturdy, quiet house on the bank of a wild river. Now that we have a place to rest, we can turn our attention to the river itself. This river is the ceaseless, churning, and often overwhelming stream of our own thoughts. For most of our lives, we do not live on the bank. We live in the water, tossed about by every current, clinging to any piece of driftwood that floats by, convinced that we are the river itself. The practice of mindfulness is the gentle and radical act of learning to step out of the water, to sit peacefully on the bank, and to simply watch the river flow. We are not trying to stop the river, for that is impossible. We are not trying to change its course. We are simply changing our relationship to it, moving from being its prisoner to becoming its silent, compassionate witness. To begin this practice, we must first change our fundamental understanding of what a thought is. Our ingrained habit is to see our thoughts as direct reflections of reality, or as essential commands that must be obeyed. A thought of worry arises, and we believe there is something to be feared. A thought of self-criticism arises, and we believe we are fundamentally flawed. Mindfulness invites us to see thoughts in a completely different light, to see them as natural, impersonal phenomena, like the weather. Imagine your mind is a vast, open sky. Your thoughts are simply clouds that drift through it. Some clouds are light, white, and fluffy, like happy memories or pleasant daydreams. Others are dark, heavy, and ominous, like our anxieties, our anger, or our deepest fears. As the silent, spacious sky, you are not the clouds. You are the container for the clouds. You are never stained by the darkest storm cloud, nor are you attached to the most beautiful, fleeting wisp of white. You allow them all to come and go, recognizing that the nature of clouds is to be transient. Another powerful image is to see your mind as a flowing river, and your thoughts as leaves floating on its surface. Our habit is to leap into the river and grasp a particular leaf, especially a dark and interesting one like a worry. We hold it close, examine it, get carried downstream by its momentum, and then struggle frantically to get back to the shore, only to grab another leaf. The practice is to simply remain on the bank, to watch the endless procession of leaves float by, without needing to catch a single one. This simple shift in perspective is profoundly liberating. The brain's job is to produce thoughts, just as the lungs' job is to breathe. The problem has never been the thinking itself. The problem is our unconscious and total identification with every thought that arises. This leads to a realization that strikes at the very root of the egoic self. The I that we believe is thinking our thoughts is an illusion. We do not author our thoughts any more than we author our heartbeats. Did you decide to have your last thought? Did you know what it was going to be a second before it appeared in your consciousness? Thoughts seem to emerge spontaneously, bubbling up from a mysterious, ungraspable source. We don't create them, we receive them. When we see this clearly, we can stop taking them so personally. We can stop believing that every thought is an accurate report about who we are or what reality is. This allows us to shift our identity from the thinker of the thoughts to the witness of the thoughts. This witness, this silent, observing presence, is our deeper nature. It is the sky, not the clouds. It is the riverbank, not the river. It is the original face we spoke of earlier, the calm, unchanging awareness that exists prior to all the noise and drama of the mind. To identify with this witness is to find a place of profound stability and peace, a sanctuary that is always available, even in the midst of a mental storm. A beautiful Zen metaphor provides a practical guide for how to inhabit this role of the witness in our daily lives. Imagine that your mind is a simple, empty house. It has a wide front door and a wide back door, and both are always open. Your practice is to be the calm, dignified master of the house, sitting peacefully in its center. The thoughts are an endless stream of visitors who arrive unannounced at your front door. Some are welcome visitors, a creative idea, a fond memory, a feeling of love. Some are unruly and unpleasant visitors, a jab of jealousy, a spike of anxiety, a gloomy cloud of self-pity. Our lifelong habit has been to frantically manage the doors. When a pleasant visitor arrives, we run to the door, drag them inside, and try to lock the doors to make them stay forever. Of course, they never do, and we suffer when they leave. When an unpleasant visitor appears, we try to barricade the door, to fight them off, to pretend they are not there. This struggle is exhausting and futile, as they often find a way to sneak in through a window. The practice of mindfulness offers a different way. You simply remain seated in the center of your house. You don't leave your seat. As each visitor appears at the front door, you simply acknowledge their presence with a calm, silent nod. Ah, planning, you are here. Hello, worry, I see you. Welcome, judging mind. You don't engage them in conversation. You don't serve them tea. You certainly don't get into a fight with them. You simply allow them the space to be what they are. You watch as they walk through your house and, in their own time, exit through the open back door. You remain the undisturbed host, allowing all guests to come and go, clinging to none and rejecting none. This metaphor points to a simple yet powerful technique known as mental noting or labeling. When you become aware that you have been lost in a train of thought, that you have jumped into the river, you can gently and without any judgment apply a soft, one-word label to the experience. If you are caught in a spiral of what-ifs about the future, you can mentally whisper, worrying. If you are replaying a past event, remembering. If you are mentally composing an email, planning. If you are comparing yourself to someone else, comparing. This simple act is incredibly effective. It immediately cuts through the storyline of the thought and brings you back to the position of the observer. You are no longer lost in the act of planning. You are now aware of the process of planning happening in the mind. The label depersonalizes the thought. It transforms it from being my vital and true worry into just another thought of worry passing through. By practicing this consistently, you begin to see the repetitive habits of your mind with startling clarity. You see how much energy is spent in familiar loops of anxiety or regret. This seeing in itself is transformative. The thoughts begin to lose their power over you, not because you have pushed them away, but because you have stopped feeding them your unconscious belief and attention. You are letting the mud settle simply by ceasing to stir the water. This practice of watching the river of thoughts is not about creating a blank mind or achieving a state of blissful emptiness. It is about cultivating a wise, kind, and spacious relationship with the mind's natural and ceaseless activity. It is the ongoing art of remembering that you are the sky, not the passing clouds. But thoughts are not the only things that float down this river. Often, they are carried along by much stronger currents, powerful forces that can color our entire world in an instant. These are our emotions. Just as we can learn to watch our thoughts without being defined by them, we can also learn to be with the full spectrum of our feelings without being overwhelmed or controlled by them. The next step on our path is to take this same spacious, non-judgmental awareness and learn to hold the ever-changing weather of the heart. Having learned to sit on the riverbank and watch the stream of our thoughts flow by, we now turn our attention to the river's powerful currents. These are our emotions. Thoughts and emotions are deeply intertwined, but emotions possess a distinct and potent energy that we feel viscerally in our bodies. They are the ever-changing weather of the heart. A flash of anger can feel like a lightning strike. A wave of grief can feel like a cold, heavy fog. A moment of joy can feel like pure, warm sunshine. For most of our lives, we treat this inner weather as a terrible inconvenience. When the sun of happiness is shining, we desperately try to make it last forever. But when the storms of sadness, fear, or anger roll in, we do one of two things. We either run inside and lock the doors, pretending the storm isn't happening, or we run out into the tempest, shaking our fist at the sky and becoming completely consumed by its fury. There is, however, a third way. It is a path of wisdom and courage that invites us to stay present, to feel the wind and the rain on our skin, and to learn from the power of the storm without being destroyed by it. It is the path of meeting our own hearts with fearless, non-judgmental acceptance. To walk this path, we must first understand a crucial distinction, the difference between an emotion and the story we tell about it. Every emotional experience is composed of two elements. The first is the raw physical sensation of the emotion in the body. Anxiety might be a tightness in the chest and a hollowness in the stomach. Anger might be a surge of heat in the face and neck and a clenching in the fists. Sadness might be a palpable heaviness in the limbs and a lump in the throat. These are pure, direct, physical energies. They arise, they crest, and, if left alone, they eventually subside, just like any other wave of energy. The second element, however, is the mental narrative that the ego immediately weaves around these sensations. The mind is a storyteller, and it abhors a vacuum. It instantly creates a plot to explain the feeling. I am angry because that person disrespected me, and this is unjust. I am sad because I failed, which proves I am worthless. I am afraid because something terrible is about to happen, and I won't be able to handle it. It is this story that causes the majority of our suffering. The raw energy of the emotion is often brief, but the story can keep it alive for hours, days, or even years. The story fuels the emotion, and the intense emotion then serves as proof that the story must be true. We become trapped in a self-perpetuating feedback loop of painful feeling and toxic belief. The practice of emotional mindfulness is to learn how to gently disentangle the two, to courageously feel the raw energy of the emotion in the body, without automatically believing or fueling the mind's dramatic story about it. Our habitual ways of dealing with difficult emotions are almost always variations of two failed strategies: suppression and uncontrolled expression. Suppression is the attempt to deny or ignore the feeling. It is the voice that says, "I shouldn't feel this way. I need to be strong. I'll just think about something else." We push the anger down, we swallow the sadness, we distract ourselves from the fear. This is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes a tremendous and constant amount of energy, and it is ultimately futile. The suppressed energy doesn't disappear. It festers in the darkness of our subconscious, leaking out as chronic anxiety, irritability, depression, or even manifesting as physical illness. And eventually, the pressure becomes too great, and the beach ball shoots up out of the water with explosive and unpredictable force. The opposite strategy is uncontrolled expression. Here, we completely identify with the emotion. We become the anger, we become the despair. The emotion takes over, and we are merely its puppet. We lash out, say things we later regret, send the angry email, or spiral into a vortex of self-pity, replaying our victimhood over and over. This strategy not only fails to resolve the emotion, it often amplifies it, adding new layers of guilt, shame, and conflict that create even more suffering for ourselves and those around us. Though they appear to be opposites, suppression and expression are born from the same root, a fundamental non-acceptance of the emotion itself. Both are forms of resistance, a declaration of war against our own inner experience. The 13th century mystical poet Rumi offered a radically different approach in his beautiful poem, The Guest House. He invites us to see our own being as a house, and to treat every emotion that arrives as an honored guest. He wrote, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor." His advice is not to lock the door on the difficult guests, nor is it to let them take over and burn the house down. His advice is one of radical, courageous hospitality. "Welcome and entertain them all," he says. "Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight." He urges us to meet the dark thought, the shame, the malice, at the door laughing, and invite them in. Why? Be grateful for whoever comes, he concludes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This is a revolutionary perspective. It reframes our most difficult emotions, not as enemies to be vanquished, but as sacred messengers, as guides. Fear may be a guide pointing to a place where we need to cultivate more trust. Anger may be a guide pointing to a boundary that has been violated. Sadness may be a guide pointing to something we have loved and lost, reminding us of our capacity to love deeply. By welcoming these guests, by listening to their message without letting them take over, We can learn and grow in ways we never thought possible. So how do we practice this radical hospitality? What does it mean to invite a feeling like anger or sadness in? It means finding the middle path between suppression and expression. It is the path of mindful feeling. When a difficult emotion arises, instead of turning away from it or getting lost in its story, we turn our attention gently towards it. We bring a curious and kind awareness to the raw physical sensations of the emotion in our body. Where is this anxiety living? Is it a knot in my stomach, a vibration in my hands? I will just feel that. I will breathe with it. I will give it space. We are not analyzing it, and we are not trying to fix it. We are simply offering it the gift of our presence. And the attitude we bring to this practice is one of self-compassion. When we feel the pain of a difficult emotion, we can acknowledge it with kindness. We can say to ourselves, "This is a moment of suffering. This hurts. May I be gentle with myself." This kindness is the opposite of the internal battle we are used to. It is a profound act of self-care that allows the frozen, painful, and rejected parts of ourselves to finally begin to thaw and heal. You are not fighting the storm, nor are you becoming the storm. You are becoming the safe, compassionate space in which the storm can rage and, in its own time, pass. By learning to welcome every guest, by treating our own heart not as a battlefield, but as a sacred guest house, we transform our relationship with ourselves. We stop being afraid of our own inner world. We develop a deep emotional resilience, an unshakable confidence in our ability to be with the full spectrum of human experience. This profound acceptance of our inner landscape, of both our thoughts and our emotions, has a natural and powerful consequence. When we are no longer expending all of our energy fighting an internal war, we are finally free to show up for our lives. We are free to arrive, fully and completely, in the only time and the only place where life ever truly happens. We are ready to receive the extraordinary gift of the present moment. Having made peace with the inner landscape of our thoughts and emotions, we are now free to arrive. We are free to come home to the only time and the only place where life ever truly unfolds. This is the present moment. For most of us, the present moment is little more than a fleeting stepping stone, a brief and often overlooked transition between a past we are trying to escape and a future we are trying to secure. We have been conditioned to believe that life is a story with a beginning and an end, and we are so preoccupied with the plot that we forget to live the only page that is ever actually in front of us, the page of now. The spiritual journey is, in many ways, a process of unlearning this habit. It is a pilgrimage back from the ghostly realms of memory and imagination, a homecoming to the vibrant, tangible, and sacred reality of the here and now. To truly appreciate the gift of the present moment, we must first see through the illusory nature of the past and the future. Let us ask a simple question: where is the past? You cannot go there. It does not exist as a tangible place. All that we have of the past is a collection of memories, and a memory is nothing more than a thought that is happening right now. It is a neurological event, a pattern of energy firing in the brain in this present moment. Furthermore, these memories are not accurate, objective recordings. They are colored by our current moods, edited by our beliefs, and filtered through the lens of the ego's story. When we dwell on the past, we are not interacting with what actually happened. We are interacting with our own mental reconstruction of it, a ghost that we are generating in the present. The same is true of the future. Where is it? It is nowhere to be found. It is a pure potential, a fantasy, a projection. When we worry about or plan for the future, we are simply engaging with a stream of thoughts and images that are happening, once again, right now. When the future we have planned for finally arrives, it will not arrive as the future. It will arrive as another present moment. We are constantly sacrificing the only thing that is truly real. this solid ground beneath our feet, for two things that exist only as mental events: memory and projection. We are trading our actual life for a story about it. This habit of mental time travel is the direct psychological address of our most common forms of suffering. There is a profound spiritual wisdom that says, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. Anxiety is a future-oriented condition. It is the disease of what if. We suffer torment and stress from events that have not yet happened and, in all likelihood, may never happen. We are attacked and wounded, not by reality, but by our own imagination. We exhaust ourselves preparing for 1,000 battles that will never be fought. Depression and regret, on the other hand, are often rooted in the past. We become trapped in a loop of replaying old wounds, reliving past failures, and nursing old grievances. We are haunted by the ghosts of what was, unable to let go of a time that is already gone and can never be changed. Peace, therefore, is not a state to be achieved in some distant future. It is a return to our natural state. It is discovered only when the mind ceases its frantic journeying and comes to rest in its true home, the vibrant stillness of the present moment. When it is not being pulled back into regret or catapulted forward into anxiety, the mind finds its own natural, peaceful equilibrium. There is a legendary story in the history of Zen that beautifully illustrates this point, known as the Flower Sermon. It is said that one day, the Buddha was gathered with his disciples on a mountain peak. A great crowd had assembled, expecting to hear a profound teaching. But on this day, the Buddha did not speak. He said nothing at all. He simply reached down, picked up a single beautiful flower, and held it up silently before the assembly. The disciples were confounded. They were scholars, masters of scripture and philosophy. Their minds raced to analyze the gesture. What did it mean? What was the symbolism? What complex doctrine was he trying to convey? They were lost in their full cups, trapped in the world of concepts and ideas. But one disciple, a man named Mahakashyapa, did not try to figure it out. He simply looked at the Buddha, looked at the flower, and in that moment of pure, unmediated presence, a gentle smile blossomed on his face. He understood. Seeing this smile, the Buddha finally spoke, saying, "I have the treasury of the true Dharma I, the wondrous mind of nirvana. It is not dependent on words or letters, a special transmission outside the scriptures. I now entrust it to Mahakashyapa. The ultimate truth was not in a complex lecture. The gift was the moment itself, the direct, wordless experience of being fully present with the reality of a single flower." Mahakashyapa received the transmission because he was the only one who was truly there to receive it. Like Mahakashyapa, we too can learn to receive the gift of the present moment. We do this by moving our attention out of the world of concepts and into the world of direct, sensory experience. Our five senses are the sacred gateways to the now. While the thinking mind is a perpetual time traveler, our body and its senses are always, unfailingly, rooted in the here and now. You can practice this at any time. Pause for a moment and simply listen. What do you hear? Don't label the sounds as car, bird, or refrigerator hum. Just receive the raw vibrations of sound as they enter your ears. Let your ears be a microphone for reality. Now, open your eyes and look at an object near you as if you have never seen it before. Forget the word for it. Just see the colors, the textures, the way the light falls upon its surfaces. See its simple, silent, and miraculous existence. Now, turn your attention to the sense of touch. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet, supporting you. Feel the sensation of the air on your skin. Feel the texture of your own clothing. Each time you consciously drop your attention into one of your senses, you are pulling the emergency brake on the runaway train of anxious thought. You are instantly yanking yourself out of the phantoms of the past and future and grounding yourself in the living reality of the present. Our breath is our most constant and loyal anchor. Each breath is a new beginning, a fresh opportunity to come home. The mind will wander, that is its nature. It will get lost in thought 100, 1,000 times. Our practice is not to scold the mind, but to simply, gently and kindly guide it back 101 times, 1,001 times. The present moment is not another idea to be understood. It is a reality to be inhabited. It is the pearl of great price that we have been searching for everywhere, not realizing that we have held it in our hands all along. The true power of this practice is revealed when we learn to carry this sense of presence with us, off the cushion and out of the quiet moments of reflection. It is when we learn to infuse our most simple, mundane, and ordinary daily activities with this same quality of sacred attention. It is when we discover that enlightenment is not a distant, mountaintop experience, but the simple act of being fully present for our own lives. Having discovered the profound gift of the present moment, we are faced with a practical question. How do we inhabit this reality, not just in moments of quiet contemplation, but amidst the ceaseless demands and routines of our ordinary lives? The wisdom of Zen offers a beautifully simple and transformative answer. It does not ask us to abandon our daily lives in search of a remote mountain cave. It asks us to bring the mountain cave into our daily lives. It teaches that there is no fundamental separation between the sacred and the mundane. The path to enlightenment is not found by escaping our life, but by immersing ourselves in it with a new quality of attention. A famous Zen saying captures this perfectly. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The outer activities of life may not change, but the inner awareness with which we perform them changes everything. The sacred is not waiting for us in a special place. It is hiding in plain sight, in the very fabric of our most mundane tasks. For most of us, daily chores like washing the dishes, doing the laundry, or commuting to work are treated as obstacles. They are dead time, periods of inconvenience that stand between us and the parts of our lives we deem more important or interesting. When we engage in these tasks, we are rarely ever truly there. Our bodies may be on autopilot, scrubbing a pot or folding a shirt, but our minds are a million miles away. We are lost in rehearsing a future conversation, ruminating on a past regret, or distracting ourselves with a podcast, a daydream, or a stream of anxious thoughts. This creates a fundamental schism in our being. We are physically present, but mentally and spiritually absent. A vast portion of our precious, unrepeatable life is spent in this state of disembodied distraction. We are effectively missing the only life we will ever have because we have judged it to be unworthy of our full attention. The practice of Zen in daily life is a direct remedy for this affliction. It is the art of closing this gap, of bringing our mind back home to our body, and of discovering the profound in the profane. Let us take the simple, universal act of washing the dishes. For many, this is a symbol of drudgery. We rush through it to get to the real part of the evening, relaxing on the couch. A mindful approach turns this chore on its head. The invitation is to wash the dishes for the sole purpose of washing the dishes. You are not trying to get it done. You are simply present for the entire experience. You begin by feeling the solidness of the dish in your hands. You turn on the tap, and you consciously feel the warmth of the water as it flows over your skin. You notice the sensation of the soap, its slipperiness, its scent. You see the dance of the iridescent bubbles as they form and pop. You hear the sound of the water running, the gentle clink of porcelain on porcelain. Your attention is not on the mountain of dishes waiting, but only on this one dish, in this one moment. You scrub it with care, not with aggression. You watch as the grime and residue wash away, revealing the clean, clear surface beneath. When your mind inevitably wanders, as it surely will, to the email you have to send or the show you want to watch, you don't scold yourself. You simply notice the thought, and then gently, kindly, you guide your attention back to the feeling of the water, back to the sound of the scrubbing, back to the reality of this present moment. In doing this, the chore is transformed. It ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a meditation. It is a practice of presence, a moment of sanity and peace in the middle of a busy day. The goal is no longer to have a rack of clean dishes. That is merely a pleasant byproduct. The true goal was to be fully alive and present for the 10 minutes you spent at the sink. This same principle can be applied to the simple act of drinking a cup of tea or coffee. Typically, this is a mindless activity. We gulp it down while checking our phone or driving to work, barely tasting it, using it merely as a vehicle for caffeine. But a cup of tea, when met with mindful attention, can become a profound experience of communion with the universe. You begin by simply holding the cup. You feel its warmth radiating into your hands. You notice the color of the liquid. You watch the steam rising in delicate, dancing patterns. You bring the cup to your nose, and you truly inhale its aroma, allowing the scent to fill your awareness. Then, you take a sip, but you don't just swallow. You let the liquid rest in your mouth for a moment, and you truly, for the first time, taste it. You feel its temperature and its texture. In that moment of pure tasting, there is only you and the tea. But we can go even deeper. As the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught with his famous meditation on eating a tangerine, we can learn to see the entire cosmos in our cup. As you look at the tea, you can see the tea leaves. You can see the green bush on which they grew. You can see the sun and the rain that nourished that bush. You can see the hands of the farmer who picked the leaves. You can see the earth, the clouds, the long and intricate chain of causes and conditions that had to come together perfectly to bring this simple, warm cup to your lips. The tea is empty of a separate self, but it is full of the universe. The mundane act of drinking tea becomes a direct, visceral experience of the interconnectedness of all things. It is an act of deep gratitude. By applying this quality of attention to one activity and then another, we begin to erase the artificial line we have drawn between our spiritual practice and our real life. Walking to the car becomes an opportunity to feel the sensation of our feet on the ground. Driving becomes a practice of observing the world around us without judgment. Eating a meal becomes a celebration of the senses. Listening to a friend becomes an act of pure presence, offering them the rare and precious gift of our undivided attention. The time we spend sitting on the meditation cushion becomes the formal training ground, the gymnasium where we strengthen the muscle of our attention. The rest of our life becomes the playing field, the arena where we get to use that strengthened muscle. Gradually, the distinction dissolves. Life is no longer fragmented into sacred time and ordinary time. Every moment, every action, every breath becomes an opportunity to be awake, to be present, to find the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. The whole of your life becomes your meditation. The sacred is not in a distant land. It is in the feeling of warm water on your hands. This practice of infusing the mundane with presence is a powerful path to peace. However, our minds are clever. The logical, analytical part of our brain, the part that loves to figure things out, can still get in the way. It can try to turn presence into another concept to be understood, another goal to be achieved. It can get stuck in its own loops of logic, unable to make the leap into direct, non-conceptual experience. What happens when our own intellect becomes the barrier? Recognizing this tendency, Zen masters developed unique and powerful tools designed to short-circuit the rational mind, to break its grip, and to force it to surrender to a deeper, more intuitive way of knowing. These are the sharp and often baffling tools known as koans. We have learned to bring a sacred quality of attention to the most ordinary corners of our lives, to find the sublime in the simple act of washing a dish or drinking a cup of tea. This practice of presence is a powerful path. Yet, our minds are formidable and clever. The rational, analytical part of our consciousness, the part that has been so brilliantly trained to solve problems and make sense of the world, can itself become a subtle trap. It can take the very teaching of presence and turn it into another concept to be dissected, another goal to be achieved, another box to be ticked. It can try to figure out enlightenment, trapping us in a library of beautiful ideas about freedom, while we remain prisoners of our own intellect. Recognizing this ultimate barrier, the tradition of Zen developed a unique and radical form of medicine, a therapy for a mind that has become intoxicated with its own logic. This medicine is the practice of the koan. A koan is not a riddle to be solved. It is not a puzzle with a clever answer. It is a question, a story, or a fragment of dialogue that is presented by a Zen master to a student, designed specifically to be indigestible by the rational mind. It is a spiritual depth charge, intended to short-circuit our normal patterns of thought and push us beyond the limits of our intellect. The rational mind is a magnificent tool, but it has its limitations. It operates on the principle of duality. It understands the world by chopping it up into pairs of opposites, good and bad, right and wrong, this and that, me and you. This is incredibly useful for navigating the practical world, but when it comes to the ultimate questions of existence, questions about our true nature or the meaning of freedom, this dualistic mind is utterly lost. It can create elegant philosophies about reality, but it can never touch reality itself. It is like trying to quench your thirst by reading a description of water. The ego is deeply identified with this rational mind. It is its home turf, its fortress of certainty. As long as we remain confined within the walls of that fortress, we can never experience the open, boundless landscape of what is. The koan is the battering ram designed to break down the gates of that fortress. The function of a koan is to engender what is called the great doubt. A student is given a koan, such as the famous, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" and is instructed to live with it, to meditate on it, to become one with it day and night. The logical mind immediately goes to work. It tries to find a clever answer. Maybe it's the sound of the wind, maybe it's silence. The master rejects all of these conceptual answers. The mind then tries a philosophical approach, but that too is rejected. It tries every possible avenue of logic and reason, and every single one leads to a dead end. This process, which can take months or even years, is designed to create a state of profound mental tension and exhaustion. The student is brought to the edge of an intellectual cliff, a place of complete and utter not knowing. The entire structure of their logical, problem-solving mind is pushed to its absolute breaking point until, finally, it shatters. This moment of shattering, of complete intellectual surrender, is the great opening. It is in this space, when the chattering, conceptual mind falls silent, that a direct, intuitive insight into reality can flash forth. This sudden glimpse of our true nature, unmediated by thought, is called kensho, or satori. It is the experience of tasting the water, not just reading about it. Perhaps the most famous and fundamental koan is the story of the Chinese master Joshu and his dog. A monk, hoping to test the master, asked him a question with a doctrinally correct answer. He asked, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" According to the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism, all sentient beings without exception possess Buddha nature, the inherent potential for enlightenment. The obvious, textbook answer, therefore, would be a simple yes, but Joshu replied with a single, explosive word, mu. Mu in Japanese, or wu in Chinese, means no, or not, or nothingness. This answer completely pulls the rug out from under the monk's feet. It is a direct assault on his conceptual understanding. Why would a great master contradict a fundamental tenet of his own tradition? The point of the koan, of course, has nothing to do with the theological status of dogs. It is a direct response to the monk's dualistic mind, a mind that asks questions based on a false premise of having or not having. The practice for a student given this koan is to put aside all reasoning and to pour their entire being into this one word, mu. When walking, mu. When eating, mu. When working, mu. It is not about thinking about the meaning of mu. It is about becoming mu. This one-pointed concentration acts like a spiritual laser, cutting through the endless stream of discursive thoughts, anxieties, and plans. The student must continually present their understanding of mu to their teacher, and they are sent back to work on it again and again, until their intellectual seeking is utterly exhausted, until they themselves become the question, and in doing so, break through to the answerless answer that mu points to. Most of us will not engage in formal koan study with a Zen master, but we can learn to apply the profound spirit of the koan to our own lives. Life itself constantly presents us with koans, with situations that are utterly paradoxical and defy our neat, logical categories. How can a person I love so deeply also be the source of my greatest pain? How can there be so much beauty and so much suffering in the world, often side by side? Why do terrible things sometimes happen to good people? Our normal response to these unanswerable questions is to feel confusion, frustration, or despair. We try desperately to find a neat explanation, a simple reason that will resolve the paradox and soothe our mind. The koan spirit invites us to do something far more courageous. It invites us to live inside the question. It encourages us to hold the painful, beautiful, confusing paradoxes of life in our hearts, not with the frantic need for a solution, but with a spacious, open, and humble curiosity. It is the wisdom of admitting, I don't know, and being at peace with that not knowing. The koan, then, is a potent medicine for a mind that has become a prisoner of its own cleverness. It is the path of great doubt, which can, in time, lead to a great awakening, by forcing us to surrender our desperate need to figure everything out. It is a practice of letting go of the conceptual map and daring to step directly into the unmappable territory of life itself. When this happens, when the frantic, effortful, and analytical way of thinking begins to dissolve, a new way of being and acting in the world becomes possible. It is an action that does not come from intellectual planning or forceful striving. It is an action that is spontaneous, effortless, and perfectly in tune with the flow of reality. It is the profound and subtle art of doing by not doing. Having shattered the rigid structures of the logical mind with the power of the koan, we arrive at a place of profound openness. From this spaciousness, a new way of engaging with the world can emerge. It is a way of acting that is so foreign to our culture of effort and ambition that it sounds like a paradox. It is the art of doing by not doing. This is not a call for laziness or apathy. It is not an excuse to resign from life and its responsibilities. It is an invitation into a deeper and far more effective way of being, a state of effortless action where our struggles cease and our movements become as natural and powerful as the flowing of a river. This principle, known in Taoism as Wu Wei, finds a deep and resonant echo in the heart of Zen. It is the discovery that sometimes the most intelligent, powerful, and productive action we can take is to do nothing at all. In a society that worships at the altar of the hustle, that lionizes grit, and that insists our value is measured by our productivity, the concept of non-action is easily misunderstood. It can sound like failure, like giving up. But this is to confuse true Wu Wei with mere passivity. Passivity is a state of paralysis. It is born from fear, from apathy, from indecision. It is the state of a log stuck in the mud of a river, unable to move. Wu Wei, or effortless action, is the exact opposite. It is not born from fear, but from profound wisdom, deep presence, and an intimate attunement to the rhythms of life. It is the state of a master sailor who, instead of trying to row against a powerful current, skillfully adjusts their sails to harness the power of the wind and the water, moving swiftly and gracefully with minimal effort. The passive log is a victim of the river. The skillful sailor is in a harmonious dance with it. Our normal way of operating, driven by the ego's frantic need to control and to force outcomes, is like trying to row a tiny boat against a tidal wave. We exhaust ourselves in a futile struggle, never realizing that the wave itself would carry us, if only we had the wisdom to turn our boat around. The art of effortless action is the art of letting go of our personal will as the primary motivator for our behavior. It is action that arises spontaneously from a place of deep listening rather than from a place of forceful planning. Think of a master surfer. A surfer does not command the ocean. They do not impose their will upon the waves. To do so would be absurd. Instead, they spend their time simply being with the ocean. They sit on their board, feeling its rhythm, watching its patterns, becoming one with its energy. They are in a state of intense, relaxed presence. They are not striving, they are waiting and watching. When the right wave begins to form, a wave with the perfect power and shape, they do not hesitate. They act decisively and completely. They paddle, they stand, and they align themselves with the immense power of the wave, riding it with a grace that appears effortless. Their action is a perfect synergy between their skill and a force of nature far greater than themselves. This is Wu Wei. Our egoic way of living is to stand in the shallows, trying to build a wave with a bucket and spade, wondering why we are so tired and why the ocean will not obey us. Wu Wei is discovering the wisdom to ride the waves that life is already providing. This state of effortless action is perfectly captured in a famous story from the ancient Taoist text, the Zhuangzi. It tells of a butcher named Ding who was carving up an ox for his lord. The lord watched in amazement, for the butcher's knife moved with the rhythm of a sacred dance. It glided through the carcass effortlessly, never seeming to strike a bone or a tendon. After the ox was perfectly disjointed, the Lord asked him, "How have you achieved such incredible skill?" The butcher laid down his knife and replied, "What I care about is the way, which goes beyond mere skill. When I first began to cut up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox. And now, I meet it with my spirit and don't look with my eyes. My senses stop and my spirit moves where it wants. I follow the natural makeup, guiding my knife through the great crevices and taking advantage of what is already there. I never touch the ligaments or tendons, much less a main joint." He went on to explain that a good butcher changes his knife once a year because he is forced to cut. A mediocre butcher changes his knife once a month because he hacks. But his own knife, he said, was 19 years old and had carved thousands of oxen, yet its blade was still as sharp as if it had just come from the whetstone. "This is because," he said, "I have found the empty spaces, and there is no friction for the blade." This is the very essence of Wu Wei. The master butcher's incredible effectiveness comes not from applying more force, but from a profound yielding, a deep listening to the natural grain of reality, and moving through the empty spaces where there is no resistance. We can apply this profound wisdom in our own lives. It begins with cultivating the wisdom of waiting. In our impatience, we often act prematurely. We send the angry email. We make the impulsive decision. We jump to a conclusion, only to create more problems for ourselves. Wu Wei teaches the power of active patience, the ability to allow a situation to ripen, to allow more information to reveal itself before we intervene. This is not passive avoidance. It is strategic non-action. This is especially potent in moments of interpersonal conflict. When we are in a heated argument, our every instinct screams at us to react, to defend our position, to attack the other person's. This is the way of hacking. It is forceful, and it creates friction and damage. The path of Wu Wei might be to do the most difficult thing of all, to do nothing, to simply listen, to hold a space of silence, to refuse to add more energy to the fire. In the space created by our non-reaction, the heat can dissipate, and a space for mutual understanding has a chance to emerge. In many situations driven by the volatile energies of anxiety, anger, or fear, the most powerful, creative, and productive thing we can do is to put down our knife, take a breath, and allow the empty spaces to be revealed. Effortless action, therefore, is the highest expression of a mind that has surrendered its need to struggle. It is the grace of the surfer, the flow of the artist, the profound skill of the master butcher. It is the discovery that we are not separate generals who must wage war on reality to get what we want. We are dancers, invited to move in harmony with a music that is already playing. It is the realization that we can often achieve far more with far greater peace by aligning ourselves with the intelligent, unfolding mystery of life, rather than constantly fighting against its current. This profound sense of flow and non-doing does not require a dramatic stage. In fact, its power can be discovered and cultivated in the smallest, most quiet, and most overlooked moments of our day, in the silent pauses between our actions, and even in the sacred space between two breaths. We have spoken of the wisdom in not doing, in allowing the currents of life to flow without resistance. But for a mind accustomed to constant motion, this can feel like an impossible task, a distant philosophy with no place in a world of deadlines and demands. We imagine that to find this stillness, we must retreat to a mountaintop or dedicate hours to silent meditation. But this is a misunderstanding. The stillness is not in some far-off place. It is woven into the very fabric of our moment-to-moment existence. We have simply trained ourselves not to see it. We perceive our life as a solid, unbroken line of events, a relentless forward march from one task to the next, one thought to the next. We feel the pressure of this continuity, a river that threatens to sweep us away if we dare to stop paddling. But this perception is an illusion. Life is not a solid line. It is a series of discrete moments, and between each moment there is a space. Between each thought, there is a gap. Between each breath, there is a pause. These spaces are everywhere, all the time, waiting for us. They are the invisible architecture of reality. Our journey now is to learn to perceive these spaces, to inhabit them, and to discover that they are not empty voids, but sanctuaries of peace. This practice begins with the most fundamental rhythm of our existence, the breath. We are so accustomed to its constant presence that we forget it is there, yet it is our most faithful anchor to the present moment. And within this rhythm lies a secret. Pay close attention. There is the in-breath, the filling of the lungs, and then, just before the out-breath begins, there is a pause. It may be infinitesimally small, a mere flicker in time, but it is there. It is the peak of the mountain. Then there is the out-breath, the gentle release, the letting go. And at the very end of that release, before the next wave of air is drawn in, there is another pause. A moment of complete stillness, a valley of quiet. This space between the breaths is the first doorway. In this moment, nothing is happening. You are not striving, not thinking, not planning. You are simply existing in the silent interval between the tides of life. You can find this doorway at any time. Right now, as you listen, you can find it. Feel the air enter your body. And now, feel the pause. Feel the air leave your body. And now, feel the second pause. This is a micro-meditation, a complete practice in a single cycle of breath. From the breath, we can expand our awareness to the flow of thought itself. We experience our mind as a continuous stream of consciousness, a noisy monologue that rarely ceases. We believe we are this voice, but this too is an illusion. Thoughts are not continuous. They arise, they linger for a moment, and they pass away, only to be replaced by the next. And if you watch very, very carefully, with a quiet and patient attention, you can begin to notice the space between the thoughts. It is like watching clouds in the sky. One cloud drifts by, and for a moment, before the next one appears, there is only the vast, empty blue of the sky itself. That blue sky is your true nature, your underlying awareness. The thoughts are merely weather patterns passing through. To notice the gap between thoughts is a profound moment of liberation. In that gap, there is no story, no problem, no me to defend or promote. There is only awareness. This is not about stopping your thoughts, which is an impossible and frustrating task. It is about ceasing to build a dam and instead simply noticing the natural spaces in the river's flow. Once you become sensitive to these subtle internal spaces, you begin to see them everywhere in your external life. Our modern world is designed to eliminate these gaps. While waiting for an elevator, we pull out our phones. At a red light, we check our messages. In a queue, we scroll through feeds. We have become allergic to the unoccupied moment. We treat these small pauses as wasted time, moments to be filled with more information, more stimulation. But Zen wisdom invites us to see these moments not as voids to be filled, but as gifts to be cherished. That red light is not an obstacle to your journey. It is an invitation to practice. For those 60 seconds, you can do nothing. You can simply sit. You can feel the weight of your body in the seat. You can notice the light changing on the dashboard. You can watch a pedestrian cross the street. You can return to the space between your breaths. The elevator ride is not a delay. It is a vertical sanctuary. The moment waiting for the kettle to boil is not a test of patience. It is a chance to come home to yourself. We can formalize this into a simple, powerful technique. Let's call it the 3-second reset. It is a practice of micro-mindfulness that can be deployed dozens, even hundreds of times a day. It requires no special posture, no quiet room, no religious belief. It only requires an intention. The next time you find yourself in one of these small pockets of time waiting, pausing, in transiciondo this. First, consciously recognize the moment as an opportunity. Second, take one single, deliberate breath. Feel it all the way in and feel it all the way out. Third, bring your awareness to a physical sensation. It could be the feeling of your feet flat on the floor, the sensation of your hands resting on your lap, or the sound of the air conditioner. That is all. The entire practice takes 3 seconds, but its effect is cumulative. Each 3-second reset is like a single drop of clear water falling into a muddy glass. One drop does not seem to do much, but drop after drop, moment after moment, the water begins to clear. By repeatedly calling yourself back to these tiny islands of stillness, you are gradually, gently, changing the baseline state of your nervous system. You are training your mind that it is safe to be still, that peace is available, not just on a meditation cushion, but in the middle of a busy Tuesday afternoon. There is a beautiful image used to describe this practice, a string of mala beads. When you look at a mala, you see the beads. You might notice their color, their size, their material. You count them one by one. Our life is like this. We see the events, the actions, the thoughts, the accomplishments. These are the beads. They are tangible, noticeable, the things we believe make up the substance of our life. But what we often fail to see is the single, continuous string that runs through every bead, holding them all together. Without that string, the beads would not be a mala. They would be a scattered, disconnected pile on the floor. That string is the silent, ever-present awareness. It is the stillness that connects every moment of activity. The practice of finding the space between breaths, between thoughts, and between actions is the practice of becoming aware of the string. You realize that your life is not just the beads of doing, but the thread of being that holds it all together. The string is silent, it is humble, it does not call attention to itself, but it is the source of the mala's integrity and wholeness. In the same way, the silent awareness within you is what gives your life its true coherence and depth. By honoring the spaces, you honor the string. You stop seeing your life as a chaotic pile of beads and begin to experience it as a sacred whole, a continuum of stillness and activity, each giving meaning to the other. And as you become more familiar with this silent thread, you start to see that it doesn't just connect the beads of your own life. You start to see that the same thread runs through everything. In our last moments together, we learned to find the sacred pauses woven into the fabric of our days. We discovered that life is not a solid, relentless line, but a string of moments, of actions, of thoughts, held together by an invisible thread of silent awareness. We found the stillness in the space between our breaths. But a question naturally arises. What is this space we have discovered? Is it a void, an emptiness that separates one thing from another, one person from the next? The modern mind, trained in separation, tends to see it this way. We see the space between ourselves and others, the space between us and the natural world, and we interpret it as a gulf of isolation. But the wisdom of the awakened heart sees something entirely different. It understands that this space does not separate, it connects. This silent awareness, this field of being in which everything arises, is not a void, it is a plenum. It is the universal medium that holds everything in a tender, intricate embrace. To truly understand this is to move from a feeling of loneliness to a profound sense of belonging. It is to discover one of the most beautiful and transformative teachings of the East, the metaphor of Indra's net. Imagine, if you will, a vast cosmic web stretching infinitely in all directions. It extends through all of time and all of space, boundless and eternal. At every single point where the threads of this web cross, there hangs a single perfect jewel. Each jewel is flawless, multifaceted, and so brilliantly clear that it shines with a light of its own. Now, lean closer. This is where the true wonder reveals itself. If you were to look deeply into the polished surface of any one of these jewels, you would see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire, infinite net. Not just the ones nearby, but all of them, stretching out to the farthest reaches of existence. And the magic does not stop there. If you were to look even more closely at any single reflection within that first jewel, you would see that the reflected jewel also contains the reflections of all the other jewels. And so it continues, on and on, a holographic, endlessly recurring dance of light and reflection. This magnificent, shimmering web is Indra's net. The net is the cosmos itself, and every jewel is a single point of existence. A jewel could be you, it could be me, it could be a blade of grass, a distant star, a fleeting thought, a drop of rain, a forgotten memory. Each part of existence is a jewel in this net. The core teaching of this metaphor is a direct challenge to our most deeply held illusion, the illusion of a separate self. We live our lives believing we are a single, isolated jewel. We think, I am here, inside this body and this mind, and the world is out there, separate from me. We build walls around our jewel, trying to protect it, trying to make it shine brighter than the others. But Indra's net shows us the impossibility of this view. The very identity of each jewel is defined entirely by the reflections it contains. If you were to remove all the other jewels from the net, a single jewel would have no reflections on its surface. It would be blank, empty, without feature or identity. It only becomes itself by virtue of reflecting everything else. In the same way, you are not a standalone entity. Your existence, Your very identity is a confluence of the entire universe. You are breathing air that was once in the lungs of your ancestors, air that has been cycled through countless trees and plants. The water in your body was once a cloud, once part of a great ocean. The food that gives you energy is a gift from the sun, the earth, and the rain. The thoughts and language you use to form your identity were given to you by your culture, your family, your teachers. You are a reflection of every person you have ever met, every book you have ever read, every kindness you have ever received. To be is to interbe. Your existence is codependent on all other existence. The line we draw between self and other is a fiction, a line drawn on the surface of water. Let us make this less abstract. Let us return to the simple sheet of paper we spoke of earlier. Before, we saw it as empty of a separate self. Now, let us see it as full of the entire universe. Hold a sheet of paper in your mind's eye. We call it paper, but that is just a label. If we truly look, we see that a sheet of paper is not just paper. We see a tree, a tall pine, or a fragrant eucalyptus, standing in a forest. To see the tree, we must also see the sunshine that nourished it, the warmth that coaxed its leaves to open. So, the sun is in the paper. We must see the rain clouds that watered the tree's roots, the mist that clung to its branches. So, the clouds and the rain are in the paper. To look deeply is to see the earth, the soil, the minerals that gave the tree its strength. The earth is in the paper. Then we see the logger. We see his hands on the saw. We see the sweat on his brow. He is in the paper, but the logger needs to eat to have the strength to work. So, we must see the field of wheat that became the bread for his lunch. We must see the farmer who grew the wheat and the parents who raised the farmer. Their love and their labor are also in the paper. We see the person who drove the truck to transport the logs, the workers in the paper mill, the shopkeeper who sold you the paper. All of these people are present in this single sheet. Their dreams, their worries, their DNA, their histories are all woven into this simple object. If you were to remove any one of these elements, if you remove the sun, or the cloud, or the logger, or his parents, this sheet of paper could not exist. It is here, now, in your hands, only because the entire universe conspired to bring it to you. It is not a thing, it is a happening. It is a jewel in Indra's net, and in its fragile surface, it reflects everything else. To awaken to this reality of interbeing is to fundamentally change your relationship with the world. The feeling of lonely, anxious separation begins to dissolve, replaced by a warm sense of profound belonging. You are not a stranger here. You are a vital, indispensable part of a magnificent, interconnected whole. This realization is the true root of compassion and ethical action. When you understand that there is no solid line between self and other, harming another being human, animal, or plant becomes an act of self-harm. The pain you inflict on another sends a shudder through the entire net, and that vibration inevitably returns to your own jewel. Conversely, every act of kindness, every gentle word, every moment of selfless help polishes not only the jewel of the recipient but your own as well. It sends a ripple of light and warmth throughout the entire web of existence. Compassion ceases to be a moral duty, something you should do. It becomes the natural, spontaneous expression of a mind that sees the truth. It is like your left hand automatically coming to the aid of your right hand if it is injured. There is no thought, no moral calculation. It is one body, one system, taking care of itself. When you see the world as your own body, loving kindness is the only logical response. This removes the heavy burden of trying to be good and replaces it with the simple joy of acting in harmony with the way things are. You are no longer a lonely warrior fighting against the world. You are the universe itself, learning to care for every part of its own being. And as you gaze upon this beautiful, shimmering, interconnected net, you notice one more thing. It is not static. The light is constantly shifting. The reflections are always moving. The jewels themselves are subtly changing, vibrating, and transforming in response to one another. This living, breathing, dynamic quality of the web reveals our next great truth, the truth of impermanence. We have gazed into the cosmic web of Indra, seeing how every jewel of existence reflects every other, bound together in a seamless whole of interbeing. We saw that the space between us does not separate, but connects. Now, we must look at this magnificent web with an even quieter attention. We must notice that it is not a static, frozen sculpture. It is alive. It breathes. The light on the jewels constantly shifts. The reflections flicker and dance. The entire structure hums with a silent, ceaseless vibration. This constant, unstoppable flow of change, this universal dance of arising and passing away, is what the Buddha called anicca, or impermanence. It is one of the three fundamental truths of existence, and to understand it truly and deeply in our bones is to unlock a gate that leads from suffering to a profound and unshakable peace. Our resistance to this truth is the primary source of our anxiety, our grief, and our discontent. We live our lives as if we could build a permanent home on the bank of a constantly flowing river. We fall in love with a particular pattern of eddies and currents, and we try with all our might to freeze it, to hold it in place. We suffer because we are trying to do the impossible. The human mind has a deep-seated craving for permanence. We seek security in solid ground, in reliable routines, in relationships that promise forever. We take a snapshot of a happy memento wedding day, a child's laughter, a moment of professional triumph, and we try to live in that photograph. We cling to youth. We grasp at health. We hold on to identities and possessions as if they were solid, eternal fixtures. But reality does not operate this way. Everything is in flux. Our bodies are changing with every breath. Our thoughts are a cascading river of appearances and disappearances. Relationships evolve and transform. Fortunes rise and fall. The seasons turn. To resist this flow is like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. The more tightly you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. This grasping, this clinging to what is by its very nature ungraspable, is the root of dukkha, of suffering. The change itself is not the problem. The passing of time is not the problem. The problem is our desperate argument with reality, our insistent demand that the river stop flowing for us. Pain is an inevitable part of life's friction, but suffering is the story we weave around that pain. Suffering is the narrative of this shouldn't be happening, or I must have this forever. Impermanence simply is. Our suffering is the friction we create by trying to run in the opposite direction. To hear this for the first time, the teaching of impermanence can sound pessimistic, even nihilistic. It can feel like a declaration that nothing matters, that all is lost. But this is a profound misunderstanding. In fact, the acceptance of impermanence is the gateway to true joy and freedom. It is not a doctrine of despair, but a doctrine of radical realism. It is about aligning ourselves with the truth of how things are, rather than exhausting ourselves in a futile war against it. Think of it this way. What is more pessimistic? To believe that a difficult, painful period in your life is a temporary storm that will pass, or to believe that the storm is a permanent feature of your landscape. The teaching of impermanence is a source of immense comfort in times of hardship. When you are lost in grief, overwhelmed by anxiety, or facing failure, the wisdom of anicca whispers a gentle truth. This too shall pass. No storm lasts forever. No night is eternal. The clouds will part, and the sun will shine again. This knowledge does not invalidate the pain, but it holds it in a larger, more spacious context. It prevents the pain from crystallizing into a permanent identity of despair. Conversely, in times of great joy, the awareness of impermanence brings not sadness, but a heightened sense of preciousness. When you know that the beautiful sunset you are watching is a fleeting masterpiece, you watch it with more attention, more reverence. When you are with a loved one, knowing that your time together is not infinite, you listen more deeply, you forgive more easily, you cherish the connection more fully. Impermanence is what makes life precious. If a rose bloomed forever, would we still marvel at its delicate beauty? If we had infinite time, would we ever feel the urgency to love, to create, to truly live? The finite nature of things is what gives them their value. Accepting impermanence allows us to stop trying to possess our experiences, like a collector pinning butterflies to a board, and instead invites us to dance with them, like a surfer riding a wave. You cannot own the wave, but you can experience the exhilaration of riding it, knowing it will inevitably dissolve back into the sea. There is a timeless story from the East that illustrates this wisdom perfectly. A powerful king, who was prone to dramatic swings of mood, summoned his wisest artisan. "I want you to craft me a ring," the king commanded, "and on it, you must engrave a message that will serve me in all circumstances. When I am filled with pride and celebrating a great victory, this message must bring me back to earth. And when I am crushed by defeat and lost in despair, it must give me hope." The artisan, a man who understood the nature of things, thought for a long time. Finally, he returned to the king and presented him with a simple, elegant ring. The king looked at it, but saw no visible message. The artisan showed him that the engraving was on the inside of the band. The king turned the ring over and read the short inscription. The words were, "This too shall pass." Sometime later, the king's army won a great and decisive battle. The entire kingdom celebrated, and the king's heart swelled with pride and arrogance. As he stood on his balcony, receiving the adulation of the crowds, his fingers toyed with the new ring. He felt the engraving and remembered the message. He read it to himself, "This too shall pass." And in that moment, his arrogance subsided. He saw his victory not as a permanent state of glory, but as a fleeting moment in the long river of time. It filled him not with pride, but with humility and gratitude. Years later, the tide of fortune turned. The kingdom was invaded, and the king was forced to flee for his life. Hiding in a cave, cold, hungry, and alone, he felt despair wash over him. He believed all was lost. In his grief, his fingers found the ring. He read the words again. "This too shall pass." A flicker of hope ignited in his heart. He realized that this defeat, this suffering, was also not a permanent state. It was a storm, and it too would eventually pass. This realization gave him the strength to endure, and eventually to rebuild. This simple phrase is a key to profound equanimity. It is a practice we can use every day. When you feel a wave of anxiety rising in your chest, you can gently whisper to yourself, "This too shall pass." You are not dismissing the feeling, but acknowledging its impermanent nature. When you feel a surge of anger, you can observe it with the knowledge that this too shall pass. This creates a space between you and the emotion, preventing you from being completely consumed by it. And when you are experiencing a moment of pure joy, a moment of deep peace or connection, you can also whisper, "This too shall pass." This does not diminish the joy, it deepens it. It fills the moment with a poignant, sacred beauty. It is a call to be fully present with the gift you have been given, precisely because it will not last. This is the freedom of letting go. It is the wisdom of the open hand. You stop clinging, you stop resisting, you stop demanding. You begin to flow with the great river of life, trusting its course. And when you look upon all the other jewels in Indra's nettle, the other beings struggling, celebrating, living, and dying, and you see that they are all caught in this same beautiful and heartbreaking dance of impermanence. A profound sense of shared experience arises. This deep seeing of our shared, transient nature is the very soil from which true compassion grows. We have walked a long path together on this journey inward. We have looked into the nature of the self and found a luminous emptiness, a space of pure potential. We have gazed upon the universe and seen Indra's net, a shimmering web where every part of existence is intimately connected to every other. And we have watched this web as it flows and changes, accepting the beautiful, heartbreaking truth of impermanence. A mind that has touched these truths cannot remain unchanged. A profound shift begins to occur, not just in how we think, but in how we feel. When the illusion of a solid, separate self begins to dissolve, when the reality of our shared existence begins to dawn, a new quality of heart emerges, as naturally as the sun rises after a long night. This quality is the fragrance of wisdom itself. In the old language, it is called karuna. In our language, we call it compassion. But this is not the compassion we may be familiar with. It is not pity. It is not a feeling of sorrow for someone less fortunate. It is the resonant hum of the universe recognizing itself. Ordinary pity comes from a place of separation. It looks down from a position of safety or superiority. It says, "Oh, you poor thing. I am glad I am not in your position." Pity reinforces the walls between me and you, between my happiness and your suffering. It can be well-intentioned, but it is rooted in the very illusion of separateness that causes so much pain. True compassion, karuna, arises from the opposite of separation. It is born from the wisdom of interconnectedness. When you see with a clear heart that the line between you and another is just a story, their suffering is no longer their suffering. It is simply suffering. It is a vibration in the one web of which you are both a part. Your heart naturally responds not with condescension, but with a deep, aching empathy, a desire to soothe the pain that is fundamentally shared. This is where the profound teaching of emptiness, shunyata, reveals its compassionate heart. Emptiness is not a cold, nihilistic void. It is a radical opening. It is the dissolving of the walls and barriers we build around ourselves. When the fortress of the ego is seen to be empty of any real substance, there is nothing left to defend. The judgments, the prejudices, the fears, the biases that we use to keep others at a distance, these all depend on a solid sense of self. When that solid self is seen as an illusion, the barriers crumble. Emptiness creates the vast, open space in which compassion can finally breathe. It is the silent, clear sky that allows the warm light of the sun to touch everything without exception. This compassionate gaze must begin its work in the one place we so often overlook, with ourselves. For many of us, it is far easier to offer kindness to a friend, or even a stranger, than it is to offer it to ourselves. Our inner critic is a relentless tyrant, constantly reminding us of our flaws, our past mistakes, our perceived inadequacies. We hold ourselves to impossible standards of perfection, and then punish ourselves when we inevitably fall short. This internal cruelty is a form of violence, and it is rooted in the mistaken belief that there is a fixed, solid, imperfect me that needs to be whipped into shape. True self-compassion is the application of wisdom to our own inner world. It is turning that warm, non-judgmental gaze inward. It is seeing our own anxiety, our own anger, our own sadness, not as signs of failure, but as expressions of our shared human condition, as storms passing through the open space of our awareness. It is treating ourselves with the same tenderness we would offer to a frightened child. It is holding our own suffering in a warm embrace and whispering, "This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment." Self-compassion is not selfish indulgence. It is a vital necessity. We cannot offer a cool drink of water to a thirsty world if our own well is dry. We cannot soothe the pains of others if we are constantly at war with ourselves. To fill our own being with a gentle, accepting warmth is the first step toward letting that warmth radiate outward to all beings. In the great myths of the East, there is a powerful embodiment of this boundless compassion. It is the figure of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva who hears the cries of the world. The story tells that Avalokiteshvara made a vow to listen to and liberate every single being from suffering. With this immense determination, he looked out over the countless realms of existence and saw an ocean of pain so vast, so endless, that it seemed utterly hopeless. He saw beings trapped in cycles of greed, hatred, and ignorance, inflicting and experiencing endless sorrow. In a moment of profound despair at the sheer impossibility of his task, his heart broke and his head shattered into 11 pieces. His spiritual guide, seeing his noble intention and his overwhelming anguish, came to his aid. He reassembled the shattered pieces not into one head, but into 11, allowing Avalokiteshvara to perceive suffering from every direction at once. Re-inspired, Avalokiteshvara reached out to help, but he found that his 2 arms were not nearly enough to minister to the endless needs of the world. In his effort, his arms too shattered into pieces. Again, his guide intervened, and this time bestowed upon him 1,000 arms, and in the palm of each of the 1,000 hands was a single, all-seeing eye. This is the image of awakened compassion. It is not a limited, personal emotion. It is a vast, panoramic awareness, the 1,000 eyes to see all suffering, in all its forms, combined with an infinite capacity for skillful, responsive action, the 1,000 hands to help, to soothe, to guide, and to heal. It is a compassion born from the complete shattering of the limited self in the face of universal suffering. This story teaches us that true compassion is not a duty or a burden we must force ourselves to carry. It is the natural, spontaneous, and joyful expression of an awakened mind. It is the warmth that inevitably radiates from a heart that has understood its own empty, interconnected, and transient nature. When you see that you and all beings are jewels in the same net, flowing in the same river, what else is there to do but to help? Kindness becomes as effortless and as necessary as breathing. This compassion is not weak, sentimental, or passive. It is a source of tremendous strength and resilience. It is the fierce, unwavering commitment of the mother who protects her child. It is the deep, quiet courage that allows one to face the world's pain without being destroyed by it, because one is no longer facing it from the fragile position of a separate self. The question then becomes, how does a person with such a heart live in a world that is often chaotic, violent, and confusing? They do not retreat from it. They do not hide in a cave. They learn to bring this compassionate strength, this inner peace, directly into the marketplace, into the heart of the conflict. They learn to become a peaceful warrior, a beacon of sanity and kindness in a troubled world. From the fertile ground of wisdom, a boundless compassion has bloomed within us. We have seen that we are not separate, that our lives are interwoven in a single, magnificent tapestry, and that we all share the same journey through the flowing river of time. This seeing, this knowing, fills the heart with a profound and tender warmth for all of existence. But what is the purpose of this warmth? Is it merely a private comfort, a personal treasure to be kept safe in a quiet room, a shield to protect us from the harshness of the world? Is the goal of this path to build a beautiful, secluded garden for oneself, while the world outside remains a wilderness? The wisdom of Zen answers with a resounding no. The garden is cultivated not for escape, but to grow the food that will feed a hungry world. The inner peace is not a refuge from life, but a training ground for life. The compassion we have nurtured is not a passive feeling, but an active, creative force. It is the fuel that empowers us to engage with the world, not to retreat from it. This engagement requires a new kind of courage, a new kind of strength. It requires us to become a peaceful warrior. When we think of peace, we often imagine a state of passive tranquility. We picture a still lake at dawn, a silent mountain peak, the absence of noise and conflict. This is a beautiful state, but it is a fragile one. It is a peace that depends entirely on external conditions. The moment a motorboat crosses the lake, the moment the winds begin to howl on the mountain, the moment we step from the quiet meditation hall into a chaotic city street, this peace is shattered. The peace of the warrior is of a different quality. It is an active, dynamic serenity. It is an inner equilibrium that is not dependent on what is happening outside. It is the peace of the eye of the hurricane. At the very center of the storm, there is a point of profound calm and stillness, while the winds of chaos rage all around it. The peaceful warrior learns to build this eye within their own heart. They carry this still point with them everywhere, into every situation. Their peace is not a fragile bubble, but a portable anchor. It is a deep, internal stability that allows them to meet the storms of life with grace, clarity, and an unwavering heart. The very term warrior can be misleading. It may conjure images of armor and weapons, of conflict and aggression, but we must understand this archetype in a new light. The peaceful warrior does not wage war on other people. The battle is not external. The battleground is the landscape of one's own mind. The enemies are not other human beings, but the ancient internal forces that create suffering for ourselves and for the world. In the Buddhist tradition, these are known as the three poisons: greed, the clinging mind that always wants more; hatred, the aversive mind that pushes away what is unpleasant; and ignorance, the clouded mind that fails to see the true nature of reality. The peaceful warrior's sword is the sword of prajna, or wisdom. It is not used to harm, but to cut through the thick vines of delusion. Their shield is karuna, or compassion. It does not defend against others, but protects their own heart from becoming hardened or cynical in the face of suffering. Their training hall, their dojo, is the entirety of daily life. A frustrating traffic jam is not an annoyance. It is a dojo for practicing patience and observing aversion. An advertisement designed to create desire is not a distraction. It is a dojo for observing greed. A difficult conversation is not a conflict. It is a dojo for practicing compassionate listening. The warrior's discipline is to meet every moment, every challenge, not with reactive anger or fear, but with a stable, mindful, and open presence. Imagine a violent storm sweeping across a vast plain. The wind howls and the rain lashes down. Small, rigid structures are torn apart. Trees with shallow roots are ripped from the ground. Everything that resists the storm with brittle force is broken by it. But in the middle of the plain stands a great, ancient oak tree. The storm rages against it, yet it remains. How does it survive? Look closely. Its smaller branches and its countless leaves are not rigid. They dance with the wind. They yield, they bend, they flow with the storm's energy. They do not fight it. This is the warrior's flexibility, their ability to engage with the surface events of life with adaptability and grace. But now, look at the massive trunk of the oak and imagine the deep, intricate network of roots that spreads far and wide beneath the earth, anchoring it firmly into the ground. While the branches dance, the core of the tree is utterly still, grounded, and immovable. This is the warrior's inner peace, their deep stability, their rootedness in the truth of their being that has been cultivated through countless moments of quiet presence. The oak tree is a master of peaceful strength. It does not survive by fighting the storm, but by embodying a perfect balance of yielding flexibility on the surface and profound stability at its core. This is the model for our practice. We learn to engage with the chaos of the world with an open and adaptable mind, while remaining deeply anchored in the unshakable stillness within. When we begin to act from this place of centered stillness, the quality of our presence in the world changes entirely. Our decisions are no longer driven by the frantic energies of fear, anxiety, or reactive anger. They arise from a place of clarity and intuitive wisdom. Our words are no longer weapons for defense or tools for manipulation. They become instruments of healing and understanding, spoken from a heart of compassion. We find that we can listen, truly listen, to another's pain without being overwhelmed by it, because our own center is secure. We can face conflict without adding more aggression to the fire, because we are not defending a fragile ego. We become a calming influence, a quiet presence of sanity in a world that often seems to have gone mad. Our own inner peace ceases to be a personal possession. It becomes our greatest offering to the world. We don't need to preach or lecture. Our very being becomes a demonstration that a different way is possible. We show, through our own stability and kindness, that one can live in this chaotic world with an open heart and a peaceful mind. This is the true power of the peaceful warrior. And once this inner stability is established, once the heart is overflowing with a compassion that seeks to serve, the warrior does not remain forever on the training ground. They look from their place of quiet strength and see the confusion and suffering in the marketplace of the world. And their only desire, their final vow, is to walk back down the mountain and into the heart of it all, not as they were before, but as a source of healing, ready to engage, ready to help, with hands open and ready to give. The peaceful warrior has found their center, anchored in a stillness that the world cannot shake, and guided by a compassionate heart that feels the joys and sorrows of all. They stand firm and clear. The inner battles have been fought, not through violence, but through the patient light of awareness. The inner demons of greed, hatred, and ignorance have not been slain, but seen, understood, and integrated. A profound peace has been realized. And so, we arrive at the final question of our long journey together. What now? Where does the path lead from this mountain peak of serene understanding? In many stories, this is where the tale ends. The hero finds the treasure, slays the dragon, and enters a kingdom of personal bliss. The credits roll. But in the deep wisdom of the Zen path, this is not the end. It is the final turning point. The journey is not a line that ends at a peak, but a circle that returns to the very beginning. Having found the treasure, the enlightened one does not hoard it in a mountain cave. They carry it, with open hands, right back down into the bustling, messy, beautiful, and chaotic marketplace of the world. The ultimate purpose of the spiritual journey is not to achieve a private, isolated state of perfection. It is not an escape from the world and its troubles. To see it that way is to remain trapped in a subtle form of ego, the spiritual ego, which prides itself on its detachment. The true awakening is the realization of non-separation, and therefore the understanding that one's own liberation is incomplete as long as others remain in darkness. The peace that has been found is not a personal possession. It is a universal medicine, and it only reaches its full potency when it is shared. The focus of the practitioner shifts entirely. The question is no longer, how can I deepen my peace? Or how can I protect my tranquility? The question becomes, how can this peace that flows through me be of service to the world? How can this clarity help to soothe the confusion of others? This is the heart of the Bodhisattva vow, the sacred promise to not enter final nirvana until all beings are liberated. It is a love for the world so profound that one willingly re-engages with its suffering, not out of a sense of grim duty, but out of a joyful, overflowing compassion. There is a famous series of Zen allegories, told in 10 pictures, known as the ox herding pictures. which describe the stages of the path to enlightenment. In the beginning, the herder searches for his lost ox, which represents his true nature. He finds its tracks, gets a glimpse of it, and eventually manages to catch and tame the wild beast. He rides the ox home, feeling a sense of mastery and joy. Then, in the 8th picture, a profound shift occurs. He transcends the distinction between himself and the ox. Both self and other disappear into a perfect, empty circle. This represents the realization of emptiness, shunyata. For many, this would seem to be the final goal, a state of absolute non-duality and peace. But the Zen masters knew the journey was not complete. The 9th picture is called Returning to the Source. Here, the practitioner, having realized emptiness, sees the world again, but with new eyes. The world is just as it is, simple and unadorned. The poem says, "The streams are flowing, the flowers are red. The sacred is not in some other realm, it is in the simple suchness of things as they are." And then comes the 10th and final picture, the culmination of the entire path. It is called In the World with Bliss-Bestowing Hands. The image is startling. After all the profound searching and deep metaphysical insight, the enlightened sage is depicted as a simple, joyful, often portly man, with his chest bare and a wide grin on his face. He is walking barefoot away from his mountain hermitage and back towards the village, towards the marketplace. He carries a large cloth sack, but it is filled with gifts for others, not possessions for himself. He is not meditating. He is not preaching sutras. He is not performing grand miracles. The picture shows him meeting a common villager, perhaps an innkeeper or a butcher. He is sharing a drink, laughing, engaging in the most ordinary of human activities. And yet, the ancient poem that accompanies this picture says that his presence is transformative. It says, "Without recourse to magic or divine powers, the withered trees around him burst into bloom. His very being is a source of healing and renewal. His hands, engaging in the simple acts of buying fish or playing with children, are bliss-bestowing hands." This is the final teaching. The ultimate expression of enlightenment is not found in solitary retreat, but in joyful, compassionate, and ordinary human engagement. It is the integration of the absolute and the relative, the sacred and the mundane, until they are no longer two different things. What are these bliss-bestowing hands? They are not hands that perform magic. They are the hands of a person who is utterly present. They are the hands of one who is free from the inner clamor of wanting, resisting, and judging. When you are empty of your own agenda, you become a space of pure, welcoming presence for others. Your hands, when they offer a cup of tea, are just offering a cup of tea. There is no desire for thanks, no fear of rejection. This simple, unconflicted act transmits a sense of peace. Your ears, when you listen to another's story, are not busy formulating a reply or a judgment. They are simply open, a vast, compassionate space for the other person to be heard. This act of pure listening is profoundly healing. Your eyes, when they look at another, do not see a labella friend, an enemy, a stranger but a fellow jewel in Indra's net. This look of unconditional acceptance allows others to let down their own defenses. You do not try to bestow bliss. You simply get out of your own way, and the natural state of your being, which is peace, radiates outward. The withered trees bloom not because you cast a spell on them, but because your own inner winter has ended, and your spring has become contagious. And so our journey comes full circle. We began in a quiet room, feeling the anxiety of an empty space, the feeling that nothing is happening. We were driven by a desire to fill that void. We have journeyed through the landscapes of the mind. We have confronted the nature of the self. We have sailed the ocean of impermanence. And we have learned to see the world through the eyes of compassion. And where do we end up? We end up right back in that same room, in that same life, but everything is different. The empty space is no longer a source of dread, but a field of freedom. The silence is no longer a void, but a sanctuary. The marketplace is no longer a source of stress, but a playground for compassionate action. We have discovered that the greatest peace is not found in gaining, but in giving. The greatest joy is not found in becoming someone special, but in becoming a simple, kind, and fully present human being. The search is over, because we have realized that what we were searching for was never lost. It was the very ground upon which we were standing all along. We have returned home. Our journey began in a silent room, with the deep and unsettling feeling that nothing was happening. We started with the modern fear of stillness, the anxiety of the empty space, the desperate need to fill every moment with noise, distraction, and purpose. From that place of subtle suffering, we walked a long path inward. We looked at the restless mind and the illusion of a future that would save us. We gently untangled the construct of the ego and saw how our constant cycle of wanting and resisting creates the very prison we long to escape. We dared to face the concept of emptiness, not as a void of nothingness, but as a space of infinite potential. We traveled from seeing a void that needed to be filled to recognizing a home that was simply waiting to be entered. We learned that the entire spiritual path is a journey from the complexity of the mind to the simplicity of the heart. And so we arrive at the final, essential truth. Peace is not a destination you must struggle to reach. It is not an achievement to be won or a prize to be awarded for spiritual merit. It is your original nature. It is the natural state of your mind when you simply stop disturbing it. Imagine a glass of water filled with mud. If you want the water to be clear, you do not need to add anything to it. You do not need to stir it more or try to fish out every particle of dirt. You simply need to set it down and allow the mud to settle on its own. Our minds are like this. The mud is our clinging, our aversion, our endless commentary. The practice is not to fight the mud, but to simply allow the mind to be still. And in that stillness, clarity naturally arises. True, unshakable serenity is found not in spite of the quiet moments, but because of them. It is discovered in the very heart of nothing happening. This peace is not a temporary shelter. It is your true home. This journey we have taken together is not a set of rules, but an invitation. The path does not end here with these words. It begins now, in your own life. The next time you find yourself waiting, in a queue, at a red light, or in a room where the screen is dark and no notifications call to you, the old habit will arise, the urge to reach for a distraction, to fill the space. In that moment, perhaps, you might remember this invitation. You might choose, just for a moment, not to move. Instead, you might take a single, conscious breath. You might feel the air enter your body and leave it. You might feel the quiet space around you, not as an absence, but as a presence. That space is not emptiness, it is freedom. The peace you seek is not somewhere else. It has been here all along, beneath the noise, waiting with infinite patience. It is always waiting for you to come home.